The Burj Khalifa is the tallest building on Earth, but nearly a third of it is completely empty. And it's not just Dubai. Most skyscrapers around the world have a lot of wasted space, built just to look taller. Architects even have a name for this, the vanity height. But that's not even close to the biggest problem with these massive buildings. Because the higher they rise, the darker their secrets get. Take the Shanghai World Financial Center, a skyscraper built in 2008 that cost around $1.2 billion. It's one of the tallest buildings in Asia with 101 floors. You can work there, shop at the ground floor mall, or crash in one of its 170-plus hotel rooms. And don't worry, you can't miss it. It has a very distinctive feature, and I mean that big opening at the top, shaped like a trapezoid. It's pretty stunning, but also controversial, especially because it was supposed to look like this. That's right, a circle. Now take a good look at it. Does it remind you of anything? If you instantly thought of Japan's flag, you're right, and you weren't the only one who noticed. A lot of people in China at the time agreed that the opening looked a little too much like Japan's rising sun symbol. So let's just say they weren't exactly thrilled about it. Of course, that similarity wasn't intentional, especially since the building was designed by an American architectural firm. In fact, they were the ones who went, maybe we should change it. And that's how the circle became a trapezoid. Problem solved. But some problems with skyscrapers can't be fixed just by changing a few design details. Take the In-Tempo skyscraper, a 47-story building in Benidorm, Spain that's caused quite a bit of drama. Back in 2013, a Spanish newspaper published a story claiming that until the first 23 floors were built, no one thought to install a freight elevator for the 41 workers. So they had to climb up and down the stairs every day. There were also reports that the building did not include elevator shafts. Turns out, these allegations were false. But even if they were true, they'd be nothing compared to everything that went wrong with this project. For starters, the construction took forever. It began in 2007 and was supposed to take only about 2 years. But by 2014, it still wasn't finished. And to make things worse, the company behind it went bankrupt. Then in 2018, another group bought the project, and it was finally completed in 2021. The workers had a really rough time through all this chaos. At one point, they worked for 4 whole months without getting paid. The situation got so bad they even considered going on strike. Then things hit rock bottom in June of 2011. It was the end of a Friday shift, and 13 workers got into the elevator to head down. But suddenly, it failed and dropped 20 floors straight to the ground. Luckily, the emergency brakes kicked in just in time. 2 workers had more serious issues, but trust me, it could have been so much worse. Because when the ambulances showed up, they couldn't even get to the site. There was no vehicle entrance at all. Why, you ask? Well, they're just trying to save some cash. Or at least that's what Spanish media said back then. Merdeka 118 in Malaysia is the second tallest building in the world, standing at about 2,200 feet. But recently, it's been making headlines not for its height, but for the controversy sitting right on top of it. It all started when a bold bank logo was added to the peak of the tower. What was meant to be a celebration, at least for the corporate world, ended up triggering backlash among Malaysians. Because you see, this isn't just a skyscraper. We're talking about a national landmark in a key spot in Kuala Lumpur. Its observation deck and shopping center are not open to the public yet. But once they are, the tower is expected to attract over 20 million visitors a year. That's huge. But now, some locals say the new sign kinda ruins the building's look and meaning, as if adding a corporate logo makes it lose its symbolic power. So, not long ago, social media was flooded with criticism. Many people complained that they were turning a national symbol into a commercial thing. The bank, on the other hand, defends the move. They claim their logo represents continuity, a sign that they've got Malaysia's back as the country reaches new heights on the global stage. But that's not the only famous skyscraper in Kuala Lumpur. In fact, building tall landmarks has always been a source of pride for Malaysia. And one of the country's biggest icons, no doubt, is the Petronas Towers. This massive project cost around $1.6 billion, and many would say it was worth every cent. From 1996 to 2004, it held the title of the tallest building in the world. But that record came with some controversy, since not everyone agreed with it. Back then, some argued that the Sears Tower in Chicago, now called the Willis Tower, was the real tallest building on Earth. Now you'd think that's easy to prove, right? I mean, just grab a giant ruler and check which one's higher. But it's not that simple, because it all depends on how you measure it. See, the Petronas Towers have those two sleek spires on top. Those needle-like structures that stick up above the roof. When you include the spires, the Petronas Towers come out on top. But the Willis Tower's antennas, which actually reach higher, didn't count under the official rules. So technically, Malaysia won the title. But not everyone was thrilled about it. Now, let's travel to London. When you step out of London Bridge Station and look up, it feels like standing at the foot of a mountain. Actually, a high-tech mountain with a massive, glassy structure rising right above you. That's the Shard, a skyscraper located in Southwark that stands about 1,000 feet tall. It's definitely impressive, but take a closer look at what's around it. This isn't Shanghai, filled with futuristic towers everywhere you turn. This is London. And not just any part of it, but one of the city's oldest areas. So yeah, the Shard stands out. A lot. Surrounded by all those charming old buildings full of character, it kind of feels like it doesn't belong there. That's why its construction sparked mixed feelings. On one hand, it draws tons of attention and tourists. Some even call it London's new icon. But on the other hand, many locals say its style and proportions just don't fit the city. Some even think it ruined London's skyline. But England's capital isn't the only city that's been changed by skyscrapers. If we go all the way to South America, we'll find that most countries there aren't really into massive towers. But there's one big exception, a city in Brazil called Balneário Camboriú. Locals like to call it the Brazilian Dubai, and honestly, it's not hard to see why. Over the last decades, this once quiet coastal town has turned into a city full of high-rises, and its skyline is now dominated by buildings like the Yacht House Residence Club, with its twin towers that rise almost 1,000 feet high. From above, the place looks stunning, sleek, modern, and full of life. But down on the beach, it's a different story. Those skyscrapers created a problem no one expected. They caught massive shadows that stretch across the sand. Now, tourists have to deal with the fact that whole sections of the beach are covered in shade hours before sunset. The phenomenon has already sparked heated debates and protests about urban planning. But whether these giant towers ruin cityscapes or redefine them, that's something we all see differently. So what do you think? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.
Have you ever seen a skyscraper that can change its shape? The creators of the F&F Tower in Panama City had a concept and only $50 million, which isn't a lot in skyscraper money. So they couldn't afford a mistake, and they finished a concrete structure with the 39 upper floors rotating 9 degrees around an axis from the first attempt, without spending any extra time or materials. Dubai's rotating tower will look different every time you see it once it's finished. Each of its 80 floors will rotate 360 degrees individually around the center of the building. The lucky residents will be able to control that rotation, which means they can choose their view from the window. A complete lap should take about 90 minutes. And no, the tower won't be a huge waste of electricity. It will produce its own energy. Wind turbines between the floors will drive the rotations. If you've ever wanted to live inside a video game, book an apartment in the King Power Mahana Khan building. This pixelated skyscraper, around the height of the Eiffel Tower, is the tallest building in Thailand. The secret behind its looks is the horizontally and vertically divided glass windows. It took 5 years to finish this beauty, with over 200 apartments, a hotel, luxury shops, restaurants, and one of the most breathtaking viewpoints in the world. The Libyan International Building features one of the world's tallest artificial waterfalls, running right down its side. No worries, they only turn it on special occasions, and it uses a mix of recycled tap water and rainwater. When it started running for the first time, the non-informed locals even reported a huge water leak. The Cybertexture office building in Mumbai looks like a huge egg made of glass and steel. It was actually inspired by a vessel that, like our planet, has its own ecosystem. To bring down the heat levels inside, the architects chose the ideal orientation and added sun shading and an underground cooling system. The Marina Bay Sands in Singapore seems like a Stonehenge look-alike, but its architect claims that he was inspired by a house of cards. The horizontal one is balanced on the 3 vertical ones. They are 3 55-story hotels with restaurants, nightclubs, gardens, shops, museums, and movie theaters. The horizontal card is an infinity swimming pool with the best view of the city for up to 4,000 visitors. The pool hangs at the height of the 57th floor, and it feels like nothing is holding it. The dancing house definitely stands out among the more traditional architecture in Prague. The nickname for the house is Fred and Ginger. The stone tower symbolizes the famous dancer Fred Astaire, and the glass tower, his partner, Ginger Rogers. There's even imaginary hair on top of Fred's tower. 99 concrete panels support the dancing shape, all of them of different dimensions. Umeda Sky Building, twice the height of Big Ben, consists of 2 towers of glass and steel to the north of Osaka Station. The floating garden observatory connects the towers on top. Although the building is in a huge city, the skywalk is so high in the clouds that the only thing you'll hear up there is the wind. If you're scared of heights, you can visit an urban garden, a theater, an art museum, or one of the many offices closer to the ground inside the building. Architect Octavio Mendoza owns probably the largest piece of pottery in the world. If you're ever in Colombia, ask the locals for directions to the Flintstone House. Yes, they call it that for a reason. The official name is Casa Terracotta, and the architect only used clay to build it. He let it bake and harden in the sun, which transformed the pliable material into solid ceramic. Every curve of the building is designed after the surrounding hills. All the furniture inside is also made of clay. Mendoza is determined to work on the casa for the rest of his life. Artists Dennis Sullivan and Francis Conklin have been saving money for 15 years, carving smaller wooden dogs to create their dream project. The Dog Bark Park Inn in Cottonwood is a 12-foot beagle that stands proud in the Idaho prairie. There is a bedroom and a living area in its body, and an extra bedroom in the head. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be inside a huge carpet? Me neither, but checking out the Azerbaijan National Carpet Museum is definitely worth it anyway. It shows the history of this important local craft in every detail. Austrian architect Franz Jans designed the construction, and it took 6 years to finish it. The Basket Building in Ohio looks exactly like a real shopping basket, except it's 160 times larger. It even has 2 attached handles. The building served as the headquarters of Longaberger Basket Company, then was sold to become a luxury hotel. A giant whale? An airship? Can you guess what's inside this building in Graz, Austria? 2 British architects won the Europe-wide competition to design this art museum. The biomorphic construction has around 1,000 acrylic glass elements on its skin. During the night, it can send light signals and messages to people on the other side of the river. It takes in daylight from the north through nozzles on its top. The needle is a viewing platform. The Half House in Toronto, Canada, was built in the late 19th century. and was one of 6 identical houses standing next to each other. When developers came to this area, the owners of all the other houses agreed to move, and this one wouldn't go. A demolition crew showed some impressive skills as they managed to tear down the neighboring house without doing any damage at all to what is now the half house. The white exterior wall used to be load-bearing, dividing the neighbors' bedrooms and living rooms. One wrong move of the excavator, and the entire construction would become ruins. The Shell House in Isla Mujeres, Mexico, stands by the ocean, was inspired by the ocean, and looks like one of the ocean's symbols. The house is shell-shaped and covered with shells from nearby beaches. Architect Eduardo Ocampo designed this beauty as he wanted to have a one-of-a-kind house for his brother to come and visit more often. Now it's up for rent for vacationers. The Bubble Palace, not far away from Cannes in France, was designed by a Hungarian architect and purchased by Pierre Cardin. In case you have a couple of spare million, you can buy this interesting property. You'll get 10-bedroom suites decorated by contemporary artists, gardens, water ponds, a swimming pool, and a 500-seat outdoor auditorium with an awesome view of the Bay of Cannes as a bonus. Can you find one house standing straight here? I know, I also failed. All the cubes in the Cube House in Rotterdam are tilted 45 degrees at their side. The idea here was to make the most of the space. Dutch architect Piet Blom designed the houses in the late 70s to look like an abstract forest. Each triangular roof represents a treetop. The houses stand at 3 floors tall, with an entrance on the ground floor, an open kitchen, and a living room on the first floor, as well as a bathroom with 2 bedrooms on the top floor. The Boot in Tasman, New Zealand is a hotel that looks like it comes straight out of a children's book. It even has legit shoelaces. There's a spiral staircase, cozy fireplace, kitchenette, and a bedroom with a balcony. If you ever find yourself in Mitchell, South Dakota, be sure not to miss out on their key tourist attraction, the Corn Palace. The locals have always been so proud of prairie gold that they first built a palace out of corn back in 1892 to prove to the rest of the world how fertile their lands are. What you can see now is the rebuilt version. Every year, they put new corn in 13 shades to form new beautiful murals.
Back in the 12th and 13th centuries, Bologna used to look like modern-day Manhattan. No one knows exactly how many towers resembling skyscrapers it used to have, but the most likely number is at least 100. The tallest of them was around the same height as Big Ben. When the towers were built, Bologna was one of the largest cities in Europe. Construction projects were massive and ambitious. Someone built cathedrals and town halls, and the richest noble families also erected towers, possibly as a symbol of status and wealth. There was no place in the city center to build grand castles, so they had to go up with the construction. They didn't actually live in those towers, but in smaller structures next to them. The towers served for defensive purposes. It took between 3 and 10 years of work to build one tower, and it was a really tedious process. Each of them had a steady foundation deep underground and a base made of big blocks of selenite stone. The rest of the tower was becoming thinner and lighter the higher it went. In the 13th century, they demolished many of the towers, and others just collapsed by themselves. Some of them were later reused as city towers, shops, or residential buildings. Now you can see only 22 towers still standing in the center of Bologna. 2 of them have become the unofficial symbol of the city, mentioned in every guidebook. Another historical surprise coming from Italy is that gladiators weren't only male. Gladiatrix were rare, but they did exist. There's evidence that several women took part in Rome's public games. In ancient texts, these women were often called ludia, or mulieres, but not ladies. Some scholars think it means that it was mostly lower-class women in the arena. The term gladiatrix wasn't used in ancient times. It was first coined in the 1800s. Women who chose to become gladiators seemed to do so for independence, fame, financial rewards, and probably debt remission. They were most likely honored like male gladiators. All this was a bit tricky to accept in Roman society at that time, and women's roles in it. At the beginning of the current era, the Roman Senate passed a law prohibiting free-born women under 20 from taking part in arena games. Emperor Septimus Severus banned all women from the arena in the year 200 of the current era. He was probably afraid that women might want to compete in the Olympic Games. It would seriously mess up the existing social order. Pineapples were once the equivalent of designer bags and watches today, a symbol of wealth and status in Britain. You can still see them at the top of the western towers of St. Paul's Cathedral, one of the most famous landmarks of London. Explorers who came back from the Americas described pineapples with so much enthusiasm that everyone was dreaming about trying the king of fruits, as it was called. Pineapples need very high temperatures and years to mature. And despite the cold and rainy climate of England and Scotland, you could see pineapples growing in any wealthy country house garden by the end of the 18th century. They even installed special greenhouses called pineries with heating systems. A single pineapple was worth up to 80 pounds, which is about $15,000 today. Of course, people would hardly eat this expensive beauty, but send it as a gift or display on a dining table until it would rot. Folks who couldn't afford to buy a pineapple would sometimes rent one to show off wealth at a party. The king of fruits became a part of various designs and tableware for the rich. Stone pineapples on gateposts and the pineapple atop the Wimbledon trophy are living memories of that time. Around 1820, there were so many pineapples imported from abroad that they started losing their luxury status. 100 million years ago, there were giant crocodiles living in the Sahara Desert. In the 1990s, paleontologists found fossilized skeletons of primitive crocodiles, including the so-called supercroc. They discovered several partial skeletons from 110 million years ago. This prehistoric giant with a head as large as an adult human was about 40 feet long. That's about 2 times as tall as a giraffe. The croc thrived both in water and on land as part of a diverse ecosystem of ancient North Africa. The expeditions to the Sahara found a whole lost world of ancient crocodiles, with some species that resembled modern animals. One of them was the dog croc. With its tall legs and keen sense of smell, it moved through the surroundings, much like a dog. Another fascinating find was the duck croc, a 3-foot-long crocodile with duck-billed platypus-like features. It was adapted for life on land rather than water. And then there was also the rat croc, a small 2-foot-long crocodile. This species had front teeth, perfect for digging up insects. These prehistoric creatures were more agile, active, and probably more intelligent than today's crocs, who are passive hunters. If noise-canceling headphones had been invented in the 19th century, they would have come in really handy. On the 27th of August 1883, the island of Krakatoa in Indonesia experienced a catastrophic eruption. It produced what is believed to be the loudest sound ever recorded. As Krakatoa collapsed, it triggered tsunamis with waves reaching 151 feet that traveled as far as South Africa. Krakatoa was an uninhabited volcanic island that hadn't erupted for 2 centuries before this terrible day. The eruption took the lives of over 30,000 people and caused extreme fluctuations in air pressure, perceived as sound. A barometer at a gasworks 100 miles from Krakatoa recorded 172 decibels. An average human can withstand up to 130 decibels of sound without getting in serious trouble. This intense pressure ruptured the eardrums of sailors on the British ship Norham Castle, which was 40 miles away from Krakatoa. The sound wave from it circled the globe, and people could still hear it even 3,000 miles away where it resembled cannon fire. The late 1800s were a golden era for grand mustaches. But there was one problem. You couldn't enjoy a cup of tea with this kind of facial hairstyle. The heat from the tea would melt mustache wax and make the ends droop. Fine gentlemen had to struggle because of it until the invention of the mustache cup. Harvey Adams, a British potter, likely invented the Mustache cup in the 1870s. He patented a butterfly-shaped ledge inside the cup with a hole to sip through. Thanks to it, the mustache didn't get wet. These cups quickly became a hit, first in the UK and then across Europe. In the United States, they were sold at stores like Sears and Marshall Field's, now part of Macy's. Mustache cups came in various shapes and sizes. Some, like farmers' cups, could hold up to a pint of tea. Others were smaller porcelain pieces shaped like conch shells or decorated with the owner's name. They often came with matching saucers. Lord Byron, one of the greatest British poets, kept numerous dogs and cats and a whole bunch of exotic animals. There was a monkey, a crocodile, a fox, peacocks, a bear, and several badgers. When Byron attended Trinity College, Cambridge, college rules prohibited keeping dogs on the grounds. He got really angry and decided to go around the rules. Byron brought a tame bear as his pet. The college authorities argued with him, but since the statutes did not specifically mention bears, they had no legal grounds to remove either the bear or its owner. Byron walked the bear on a chain, talked to it, and even considered applying for the bear to become a student at the college. We still don't know how and where Byron got the bear, but when he left Cambridge, he took the bear with him to his estate in London.
Most of Europe's skyscrapers are concentrated in 5 cities. Those are London, Frankfurt, Paris, Moscow, and Istanbul. But even combined, all these places have fewer skyscrapers than New York City alone. For a building to be considered a modern skyscraper, it has to be about 490 feet high, which means it should have at least 40 to 50 stories. A story is simply one floor of a building with an average of 14 feet from floor to ceiling. If you had visited the US just before the 1870s, you'd have found only one skyscraper. The home insurance business in Chicago was the world's first high-rise building with 10 floors. Wow! In Europe, the first skyscrapers appeared in Moscow. They were called the Seven Sisters, but they were built only in the mid-1900s. North America started to construct more and more high-rise buildings. It happened because cities were getting too populated. Every piece of land was too valuable. New York's skyline is so famous you'd probably recognize it even if you've never been to this city before. It's the same for Paris. But could you imagine the Eiffel Tower surrounded or even blocked by skyscrapers? It would surely lose some of its magic. La Défense district is where you'll find skyscrapers in Paris. This way, they don't interfere with the romantic and touristic scenery of the city. In London, things are done a bit differently. Some of its skyscrapers have unusual shapes. One of such constructions is the Gherkin. If you get stuck in this building, you'd really be in a pickle. Another interestingly shaped skyscraper is the Shard. There's one more nicknamed the Cheese Grater. These are not their official names, of course, but they do make sense if you look at the shape of these buildings. But it's not some random architectural concept. The reason the skyscrapers are shaped like this is not to obscure St. Paul's Cathedral. By the way, the top of this monumental construction is visible even from King Henry VIII's mound, and that's a great distance away. Anyway, there are also other sites, like the Tower of London and the Palace of Westminster. They have their own viewpoints. So, not to ruin London's skyline, it's not allowed to build anything that would block these monuments. Most European cities already existed when the US started to build its first skyscrapers. That's why they didn't have much space to fit in giant buildings. Evenly zoned cities were the result of their steady growth throughout the years. For example, in Lisbon, there's a viewpoint in Eduardo VII Park. From that point, you can see all the park and the river. If suddenly there was a bunch of 490-foot-tall buildings standing around, this gorgeous view would be totally ruined. You wouldn't see the iconic avenue, and forget the river. Instead, there are buildings. Like Lisbon, many other cities in Europe don't want skyscrapers to spoil their cultural heritage. Take Germany. Most of their skyscrapers are in Frankfurt. In other cities, they'd rather protect and restore the buildings that are already standing. And even if, let's say, Berlin wanted to home some skyscrapers, it wouldn't be able to do it in any case. Its soil just wouldn't allow it. Put a skyscraper there and it'll sink. Constructing a foundation for a very tall building in Berlin would mean investing a lot of money. The soil's too sandy and soft. But what if you ignored all the cultural heritage and still decided to fill a European city like Prague with skyscrapers? First, you'd have to demolish a lot of what already exists there. This would lead to an angry crowd of people complaining that the city they know and love is gone. Brussels has experienced this to a certain extent. There's even a term for this phenomenon: Brusselization. Simply put, it means not caring where you place new high-rise buildings. Here is fine. Oh, sprout one over there too. Hey, we could call them Brussels sprouts. Or not. But in most cases, city authorities don't want new constructions to change the historical appearance of the place. Some large European cities might even follow France's example and choose a separate district, a place just for skyscrapers. The Burj Khalifa, which is more than 2,700 feet high, is the tallest building in the world. It wasn't an easy feat to construct it. The skyscraper took 6 years to build, and folks say it was worth the effort. The construction is so tall, you can see it from 60 miles away on a clear day. The tallest building in Europe is only half that size. The Lotte Center in St. Petersburg is a bit more than 1,500 feet tall. Well, the question is, if skyscrapers are so tall, why don't they get knocked over by wind? Their structure, from the very foundation to the highest point of the building, is the answer. Take the Burj Khalifa, please. The soil where the skyscraper is built isn't ideal. So, beneath the 110,000-ton concrete foundation of this massive construction, there are 192 piles driven to a depth of more than 160 feet. Thanks to the friction between the concrete and soil, these piles don't move at all, creating a solid foundation. But most skyscrapers are built on bedrock because it barely shifts. Their frames are made of steel. If you looked at a skyscraper without its external structure, all you'd see would be a bunch of steel beams. The taller the building, the more the winds affect it. Taming them is one of the biggest challenges skyscrapers have to tackle. Imagine you're on one of the top floors of a skyscraper. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind hits the building. The entire construction starts wobbling, and you can feel it even inside. You might even get knocked over if you don't grab onto something. To avoid such a situation, most skyscrapers have a pendulum-like structure inside. It absorbs some of the wind's force. This thing is called a tuned mass damper. The mechanism acts as a counterweight. When the skyscraper gets hit by the wind, it's the tuned mass damper that moves instead of the building. Some high-rise constructions don't need this pendulum. The Shard, for example, deals with the wind with the help of its tapered shape, and Shanghai Tower uses its 120-degree twist. Both skyscrapers have incredibly smart structures. That's why they don't get too wobbly when the wind hits them. The Shard doesn't have a tuned mass damper whatsoever, and the one in Shanghai Tower only serves as a tourist attraction. Before a building's design is finalized, it normally undergoes a wind tunnel test. A model city is built and tested with this new super tall addition. When the experts turn the wind on, it simulates real-life conditions. Let's say the model skyscraper breaks under the wind's pressure during the test. Then the chances are it's going to tumble over in real life too. Winds up there can be so strong that things like wind turbines have become a thing. The Bahrain World Center has 3 of them right in the middle of the building. But there are some others. Strata SE1, for example, has wind turbines at the top. There's a phenomenon called the downdraft effect. It's accelerated winds near the skyscraper. When a powerful gust of wind hits a high-rise building, it gets pushed upward around the sides of the construction and down toward the street. That's why if you're passing by a particularly tall building on a windy day, you might have to force your way around. But let's say several square-cornered skyscrapers are built next to each other. Then they're likely to channel the wind through the streets. This can create many hurricanes on especially windy days. A study once examined 100 tallest buildings that were about to be dismantled by their owners. It turned out most of them had an average lifespan of a mere 42 years, but some of them can last much longer. For example, the Temple Court building is still standing to this day. At 150 feet, it's a bit smaller than others, but it's already seen 100 winters throughout its life. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when you think of getting rid of a building is dust, debris, and deafening noise. But things aren't quite as dramatic as that for most skyscrapers. When you want it gone, you take it apart, bit by bit. This process starts from the top and goes all the way down to the bottom. Voila! The building is slowly disappearing in front of your eyes. Abracadabra.
The Museum of Bad Art, or MOBA in short, used to be located in an old basement in Dedham, Massachusetts. And currently, you can find it in Somerville, Massachusetts.
It only accepts art pieces that are so bad you just can't ignore them. Their collection includes portraits. Get it? That's the name they use for portraits. And some really outrageous landscapes. There's also the MOBA Zoo, featuring really unfortunate depictions of our furry friends. Like any self-respecting museum, they also have a gift shop where you can purchase some prints, postcards, or even a coffee mug with your favorite bad art. Speaking of really unique experiences, how would you like to spend time in jail without actually having to break the law? In Scotland, there's a place called Inverary Jail. It's an actual former prison that dates back to the 1800s, where tourists can experience 19th century jail life. There are characters dressed in authentic costumes that make it even more realistic. You can participate in courtroom trials and work with other inmates. In Suwon, South Korea, visitors can check out a theme park built around the history and culture of toilets. It was opened in memory of the former city mayor. He dedicated a lot of time and local resources to improving the city's public toilets and sewer system. It goes without saying that this place has a lot of toilet-themed art documenting the world's restroom culture. You'll find everything here, from men's and women's bathroom signs from around the globe to photographs of public toilets, and information about the importance of sanitary facilities. A designer store in the middle of the desert? If you happen to pass by Texas, you'll find a Prada store on an empty stretch of US 90 outside of the small town of Valentine, about 150 miles from El Paso. Two Berlin artists wanted to offer Texans the high-end experience, sort of. That's because the curious store has no door to access it, and its 20 left-foot shoes and 6 purses set on display. Surprisingly, the store was built with the blessing of Miuccia Prada herself, the head designer of the brand. Can you imagine living in a city where you have your own beach access to a lagoon that leads directly into the sea? That might be possible in the near future, if you don't mind relocating to Sabah Al Ahmad Sea City in Kiran, Kuwait. This engineering masterpiece was inaugurated in 2016. Its canals form 120 miles of artificial shoreline. All those human-made islands were built by excavating large channels in the desert rather than using reclaimed land, as was done previously in similar conditions. Before visiting this museum, you have to take off the shoes you've been wearing and put on special slippers that won't damage the artwork, because it's everywhere. It's called the Electric Ladyland, and it's the world's first museum of fluorescent art. The owner, Nick Palladino, exhibits here a lot of his own sculptures and even naturally luminescent rocks, along with other human-made glowing objects. One portion of this art gallery features paintings that shift color under UV light. The soundtrack is awesome too. You'll hear a lot of the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix. Upside-down houses seem to be quite a tourist attraction. You can find them in many countries, such as Japan, Poland, Germany, and Austria. One of the best ones to visit is located in Malaysia. It's called Rumah Terbalik Upside Down House. It uses recycled wood and other natural materials to recreate a local atmosphere. It was opened back in 2012 and soon became a popular tourist attraction with its upside-down furniture and wacky household appliances. There's even an upside-down car parked in the garage. A spa-themed park located in Hakone, Japan, provides tourists with an interesting array of hot springs. Some of them are quite unusual, especially the unique noodle bar, where visitors can literally swim in a bowl of ramen. It's not for tasting though, since it's still a public space. The Dead Marsh in Namibia offers a cool experience which makes you think you're frozen in time. Since there's no water here and temperatures are really high, this sparse forest is made out of skeleton trees that haven't been alive for more than 600 years. Since there's little to no humidity, the remaining vegetation cannot fall apart, leaving behind this odd natural landscape. It even became the set for some sci-fi movies. Spoiler alert! But the Paper House located north of Boston, Massachusetts is actually a house made completely out of paper, furniture and all. It was built by Ellis F. Stenman, the man behind the machine that makes paper clips. Back in the 1920s, he basically wanted a 2-room summer home for him and his family. It took him over 20 years to complete, since the house was made of about 100,000 newspapers. Just make sure you don't bring any lighters. Cappadocia Cave Hotel in Turkey is a great place to stay for both history buffs and people who are into modern and luxurious decor. All of the rooms and suites are located inside the local cave dwellings dating back to the Roman and Byzantine periods. Cappadocia is also famous for its hot air balloon tours. One of the reasons is because it's not very windy here and the view of the city is really beautiful, especially during sunset. The small Indian town of Deshnok certainly wouldn't be on your vacation list if you don't like rats. A 14th century legend has it that the rats living here are to be protected and nurtured. Over 20,000 rats live inside this famous location these days. Since they've been living there for so long, the rats are quite friendly with both locals and tourists. The Battle of the Oranges is a local festival happening each year in late February in a small Italian town of Ivrea. The local myth has it that the Carnaval de Ivrea started back in the Middle Ages. That's when locals stood against a hated ruler by throwing oranges at him in protest. It sounds like fun to join thousands of participants gathering there for 3 days to throw some oranges. Just don't forget to duck. Socotra Island in Yemen was separated from mainland Africa more than 6 million years ago. That's probably one of the reasons why this secluded island looks more like the set of a fantasy movie than a real location. The island has some incredible and unique flora. Most of the plants and trees that grow here are not found anywhere else in the world. Like, for example, the ancient twisted dragon's blood tree or the bulbous bottle tree. Japan's Tashirojima is rightly nicknamed Cat Island, since it has a population of 100,000 humans and almost 4 times as many felines. The cats were initially brought here since the island produced a lot of silk, and mice like silkworms a lot. More so, the cats were seen as a sign of good luck. There are even cat-shaped cabins for tourists to settle in, and it probably goes without saying that dogs aren't allowed there. There are about 1,700 weirdly shaped hills in the middle of Bohol Island in the Philippines. They're so unique that you might easily mistake them for human-made. They are, however, part of the UNESCO heritage, since they are naturally made out of coral deposits and shaped by rainwater erosion. Because of their quirky look, they earned the nickname of Chocolate Hills, since during the dry season, their exterior goes from lush green to brown. Big fan of cascading pools? Then make sure to check out another UNESCO World Heritage Site located in Pamukkale, Turkey. The name means Cotton Castle in Turkish. It's set in the ancient ruins of Hierapolis, a city that was built around the pools. Their crystal clear waters cascade from natural springs down to white travertine terraces. The view is so beautiful that you won't know what to do at first. Take a picture or jump in.
Wow, looky here. It's New York City, the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. Hong Kong on the Hudson, the greatest city in the world. New York, New York, the city so nice they named it twice. Alright, I'll stop. You thought you knew this city so well, but underneath all that glitz and glamour is a facade, literally. New York is populated with some of the most iconic urban buildings in the world and home to some of the most unique and famous towers. Who would have known that New York was a front for fake buildings? And the cool thing is that there are plenty to search for. Okay, I'm adding that to my bucket list. So the question is, why do they put these fake buildings all over New York? The city is one of the most vibrant places in the world and requires many infrastructures to keep the city in motion. That means having many industrial structures and buildings in every major district. New York is charming for the design and the buildings. Imagine having industrial structures right next to your favorite pizza parlor or hot dog stand. The designers thought ahead and decided to disguise those industrial infrastructures as fake buildings. They blend with the city so well that they don't stand out. They look like your good old apartment or housing unit with a front door, real-life windows, and even charming balconies where people would hang out. The only thing is that there's nothing behind the facade and no one is allowed inside. So, where in the world can you find these fake buildings? For starters, one of the most popular fake buildings is in Brooklyn. At 58 Joralemon Street, you can find a very typical neighborhood. But between the buildings stands a brick building with a slightly deeper shade than the rest. It has bright open windows that blend in with the rest of the buildings in the neighborhood, except that they're blacked out. At first glance, you might not think of it as anything, but if you pay close attention, the building looks like a glitch from a video game. It was built in 1847, way before New York was considered glamorous. Originally, it was meant to be a regular building, but in 1908, they converted it into a fake building. Don't think you can just try to break in. Even if you could, it's pointless, because it's part of a ventilation fan for the subway. It also serves as an emergency exit for some of the surrounding buildings. Actually, throughout New York, many fake buildings exist to disguise the subway vents for the smoke to escape. All the way to 415 Bruckner Boulevard, the Bronx, this townhouse was designed by the Switzer Group, which is an interior architect company. It's not as charming as the one at 58 Joralemon Street, but it serves a similar purpose: to hide an electric substation for New York's utility company. The city needs these substations to reduce the high-voltage electricity to a lower voltage so it can be distributed locally. Having a building like this popping out of the middle of your neighborhood isn't exactly the smartest way to attract people to the Bronx. That's why the fake townhouse facade is the perfect camouflage. Now, some of these fake buildings don't really hit the mark and stick out like a sore thumb. The people of Manhattan describe the Mulberry Square infrastructure as a complete clunker. After plenty of redesigns and back to the drawing board meetings, the result is still not pretty. The locals compare it to a concrete box. They created windows without glass, which doesn't allow the building to blend in with the rest of the neighborhood. But it beats a typical subway ventilation plant either way. There are just so many places to visit and cross off your bucket list. But if you live in China, you can literally stay in the country and visit many iconic cities around the world. The replica cities began when the Chinese economy started booming in the early 90s. They wanted the lifestyle of the rich and famous without wanting to leave their country. They can be comfortable eating their local food and get the feeling of being abroad. The Chinese province of Guangdong has an identical copy of the historical Australian alpine village Hallstatt. The real Hallstatt is centuries old and one of the most charming places to discover. The local people of Hallstatt also had no idea that their home was being built in China. Some people thought that this was controversial, probably because it cost around $940 million to build it. Paris is undoubtedly one of the most charming cities you could ever visit. Its rich history and vibrant culture are enough to catch the first plane to go there. For residents of Tianducheng, that's something they can do anytime they want. The city is also known as Sky City and has a replica of the Eiffel Tower that looks eerily like the iconic one in Paris and built buildings to match the city's visual charm. One of the main things that will break the charm is the farmland surrounding the city. There's barely anyone there, and the streets are always empty, very un-Paris-like. Still, you can find some nice fountains and statues scattered along the streets to give it some spirit. There's laundry hung everywhere, even on the trees. The picturesque fountains are dry and many apartments are empty. Only a few stores are open for business. Even though this looks like a fake city, it's quite real. Some people live here because it's more affordable than other places. 2 hours away from this town is another version of Paris's Pont Alexandre III and a carbon copy of London's Tower Bridge, but with 4 towers instead of 2. Hey, such a bargain! You can also visit the closest thing to Italy, but this time you can go shopping. Florentia Village is an outlet mall that offers an array of shops to lose yourself. The good thing is that this was built by an Italian developer to capture the essence of an Italian village. It has fountains, canals, and mosaics for proper aesthetics. It began in 2011 and has more than 200 shops with many Italian brands and British, US, and Chinese brands as well. The place is so popular that it gets between 10,000 and 25,000 visitors per day. China also has other replica towns that put you in a mini Manhattan called the Yuzhipu Financial District. The developer's goal was to make this place the financial center of the world. It was complete with the right landmarks, like the Rockefeller and Lincoln Centers, but the project was halted in 2019, leaving it mainly empty. You can find a typical English town with cobbled streets, Victorian homes, and restaurants that make Thames Town. This place was meant to recreate a European lifestyle fantasy without leaving Shanghai. China also has a Dutch town that has some elements of Amsterdam with windmills and famous canals. They even decided to copy some of the landmarks, like the Netherlands Maritime Museum. Here's a bonus story of Lebanon's thinnest building built out of a dispute. It's the story of two brothers who both inherited unequal plots of land. One of the brothers happened to get a very thin plot of land and couldn't help but be jealous of his brother's nice plot of land. He wasn't pleased. Both of the lands overlooked the Mediterranean Sea in a lively neighborhood of Beirut. So it's no wonder that both brothers couldn't agree on how they should develop their lands. It was obvious that the brother with the most land could build a proper building. The other brother had to improvise. He decided to obstruct his brother's property by constructing a thin building enough to only fit 14 feet at its widest and 2 feet at its most narrow. It was constructed in 1954, and the locals of the area know it as the Grudge. The crazy thing is that the place was once habitable with many visitors enjoying their stay. It's not easy to live there, but it's part of living the experience. The building is still standing, but is empty. The lost city of Atlantis may have actually been found. No, really. Two researchers were working in the waters off the coast of Cuba when they discovered the ruins of what looked like an ancient submerged city. That happened about 20 years ago, and yet no one really talks about it today. It's like the authorities just took the research, locked it away in some top-secret room, and decided no one else should know about it. But why? Well, I'm going to tell you. Back in 2001, Paulina Zalitsky, a marine engineer, and her husband, Paul Weinswig, were hired to explore the waters off Cuba's western coast. They had two main objectives: to search for old shipwrecks, possibly hiding treasures like gold and jewels, and to locate valuable oil and natural gas deposits deep underwater. They were using a sonar. Basically, this equipment is like a sound-based radar. It sends out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something, like a sunken ship, they bounce back. The system can figure out where and how far the object is just by listening to the echo. So, the couple was scanning the seafloor with this equipment more than 2,000 feet below the surface. And then, out of nowhere, they found something way more interesting than gold or oil. They found stones. Not just any stones. I'm talking huge, perfectly arranged stones. Kind of like a mini version of the pyramid at Chichen Itza. Or even better, like a bunch of tiny submerged Chichen Itzas. Yep, they saw that. Or at least, they think they did. The thing is, sonar doesn't work like a camera. It definitely doesn't record video or take actual pictures underwater. What it does do is create images using sound. And those images are usually just outlines or shapes, kind of like a blurry black and white sketch. It shows you where things are, but not exactly what they look like. And that's exactly what happened back then. The equipment started producing images of these perfectly organized stone structures, and it really looked like some kind of urban development. I mean, the site was just too organized, too symmetrical to be just random rocks. But it sounded too good to be true. I mean, this discovery could totally change everything we know about ancient civilizations on the American continent. So the scientists decided it would be too irresponsible to announce anything without finding more evidence first. And that's why they decided to go back to that same spot. This time they sent down an underwater remotely operated vehicle to actually see what was going on beneath the sea. See? This robot was basically an underwater cameraman. And yep, it confirmed it. There was definitely something strange down there. It looked like an ancient city made of huge, smooth blocks of granite. These rocks were about 8 feet by 10 feet. Some were in pyramid shapes, others were circular. Some seemed to be deliberately cut and then stacked on top of each other, while others appeared isolated from the rest. Together, they looked like they were forming corridors and outlines of rooms. It was like finding large buildings in the middle of an underwater desert. These images were enough for Zalitsky to seal the deal. Back then, she confirmed that this amazing structure, her words, could have been a large urban center. Again, her words. Then the couple started to speculate. They said that these structures were probably built more than 6,000 years ago, which would make them older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt. It's even older than the famous Maya, the civilization that used to live in the Americas and is known for their ancient and advanced temples. The research also suggested that these structures might belong to a civilization that lived on the American continent thousands of years ago, and that we didn't even know about. This supposed civilization once thrived on a 100-mile land bridge connecting Cuba to Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. But then, something catastrophic happened. According to their theory, the Earth's faults shifted beneath the surface, leading to a massive earthquake. Then, in the blink of an eye, the entire bridge was destroyed. The land was swallowed up by the sea and ended up at the bottom of the ocean, and this civilization disappeared. Of course, all the connections to the famous Atlantis myth got the media totally hooked on the story. News websites ran headlines like "Lost City of the Caribbean Found" and "Atlantis Found in Cuba." So, could that really be Atlantis? I mean, did they finally find the remains of this supposedly super advanced and lost civilization? Well, it's hard to say. From the start, part of the scientific community wasn't buying into the story too much. First, there's the issue of the date. Saying that this civilization existed at this spot at least 6,000 years ago just wasn't very credible. Then, some European archaeologists argued that the stones they found using sonar might just be natural limestone, not perfectly sculpted granite. And third, it was too deep. Even with the whole theory of earth faults opening up and swallowing everything, it's still hard to explain how an entire city ended up so deep in the ocean. For comparison, there is Heraklion, a real ancient Egyptian port city that got submerged. Today, it is only about 19 feet underwater. But this so-called Atlantis city is at depths between 2,000 and 2,460 feet. See how that's totally different, right? People think it would have taken around 50,000 years for such stone structures to sink to the depth where they are said to be found. And according to experts, none of the known civilizations from that long ago had the ability to build such structures. But for Zalitsky, yes, it was possible. She still believed in the fault theory to explain how this land ended up at the bottom of the ocean so fast. Big movements of the Earth's tectonic plates are usually followed by things like volcanoes and earthquakes. So, according to her, it's a powerful event, and the island sinking could have happened really quickly. This earthquake theory could also explain why some of the megaliths on the seafloor look organized while others don't. But to really prove any of this, they needed a specially designed robot to go down there again and take samples of the rocks and sediment. That way, they could figure out how old the rocks were and maybe even find signs of human life, like carvings, sculptures, or artifacts. The problem is, drilling into those structures isn't easy. They look like granite, and drilling granite that deep underwater is seriously tough. And more than anything, they needed money to do it, a lot of it. So maybe they just never got the funding. Because even with all that initial hype, no further explorations or studies were ever reported. And that lack of follow-up sparked a lot of speculation. Some people even wondered if the story got shut down on purpose, like maybe the authorities wanted to keep something top secret. As if this underwater city was built by some kind of higher extraterrestrial being, and they just don't want us to find out. But truth be told, the strongest argument for saying, yeah, that is definitely a lost city, is that nature supposedly couldn't have built something so symmetrical. Geologists did try to find natural explanations, or at least similar examples from other parts of the world, but they came up short. Still, just because we haven't found a clear natural explanation doesn't mean there isn't one. Nature can create some pretty wild and unexpected stuff, so honestly, that whole too perfect to be natural angle is kind of a weak argument. What most likely happened is that experts just weren't convinced it was actually a sunken city. And that's probably why no one followed up on their work. Over time, the buzz faded, the story disappeared, and the site slipped back into silence. And without more data, the true nature of those underwater formations off Cuba's coast is still a mystery. To energize this amazing venue, which comes with a hefty price tag of around $2.3 billion, you'll need 28 megawatts of power, enough to supply electricity to about 21,000 homes. It was originally projected to cost just $1.2 billion, but challenges arose and the budget ballooned. I'm talking about the Sphere in Las Vegas. This place is so massive, it could fit the entire Statue of Liberty from its base to its torch. Standing at 366 feet tall and stretching 516 feet wide at its largest point, it can accommodate up to 20,000 people if they're all standing. If you want to sit down, the capacity drops to 18,600. Still, that's enough room for the entire population of some small nations, like Palau. Now let's dive into its construction. To kick things off, you need land, and the sands provided the site. They dug out 110,000 cubic yards of dirt and rock to get things rolling. Just to put that into perspective, a cubic yard of loose, dry topsoil weighs around 2,100 pounds. If it's wet, that weight can shoot up to about 3,000 pounds. In total, they excavated the weight equivalent of 3,500 adult male megalodons. If we're talking dry soil, of course. The external sphere is 30% taller than the inner dome. Building the dome's roof took 3,000 tons of steel, which included 32 hefty trusses, each weighing 100 tons. Altogether, the dome weighs around 13,000 tons and covers a surface area of 220,000 square feet. When the construction team reached the halfway mark with the dome trusses, they had to shift the crane to the southern end of the site to finish the remaining trusses. That move alone took 2 days. It's no surprise considering the crane used is the fourth largest crawler crane in the world. Transporting it from Belgium was hard. First, it was shipped to California. Then, 120 tractor trailers took it to Las Vegas. Another 18 days were needed to set it up using a secondary crane. The Gateway Arch is an impressive 630-foot monument situated in St. Louis, Missouri, with a base that matches its height. It's just as wide as it is tall. Made of stainless steel, this cool curved arch is not only the tallest of its kind, but also the tallest building in Missouri. Some say it's even the tallest human-made structure in the Western Hemisphere. It was built to celebrate the westward expansion of the U.S. and is officially dedicated to the American people. You'll find it in Gateway Arch National Park, which, fun fact, is actually the smallest national park in the U.S. It doesn't even feature a natural area. The arch was designed by a Finnish-American architect who won the design competition for design concept in the 40s. However, it took some time for construction to begin. The whole building process started in 1963 and was wrapped up in 1965. It cost the U.S. Treasury around $13 million. You may say, hey, it's nothing compared to the sphere you mentioned previously. Yeah, but back in the 60s, $13 million could buy you what $96 million can buy you today. But still, the arch is way cheaper than the sphere. The construction bidding was pushed from the 20th December 1961 to the 22nd of January 1962, with around 50 companies interested, and the winning bid signed on the 14th of March 1962, backed by a $2.5 million city subsidy. McDonald, not McDonald's Construction, the company in charge of the project, built a cool 30-foot viewing tower for crowds to check out their epic project. In 1963, about 1 million people showed up to take a look at the project in progress. Initially scheduled for completion in 1964, the arch was only revealed to the public in 1967. Stan Wolf, the project manager at McDonald Construction Company, mentioned that constructing a 62-story building is simpler than building an arch. He explained that with a building, it's all about stacking things straight up. With an arch, you're dealing with a lot of curves. Now, this building has set a bunch of world records. The tallest existing structure, the tallest building ever, the building with the most floors. This iconic tower is the centerpiece of a massive mixed-use development featuring 30,000 homes, 9 hotels, 7.4 acres of park, 19 residential skyscrapers, the vast Dubai Mall, and an artificial lake, essentially a mini-city. Designed to attract global attention and investment, the Sheikh aimed for the extraordinary. Ever felt a chill in the air while flying? At the top of the Burj Khalifa, it might feel a bit like you're on a plane, with temperatures about 11 degrees cooler than at ground level. The building's spire, made of over 4,000 tons of steel, stands at 660 feet tall, although it's mainly for looks, as the building would still be an impressive 1,919 feet without it. The exterior consists of reflective glass panels and aluminum, designed to handle the fierce desert sun and wind while providing great thermal performance. Those glass panels are no joke. Each weighs about 800 pounds. The building is equipped with 57 elevators, including the world's fastest double-deck variety, zipping passengers up and down at speeds of up to 33 feet per second. But if you're up to some cardio, there are 2,909 stairs leading to the 160th floor. No thanks, after you. Given how tall the Burj Khalifa is, you may mistakenly think water might be an issue. I mean, it's obviously hard to pump it up there, but it's not. Burj Khalifa's system delivers around 250,000 gallons of water daily through many miles of pipes. The temperature regulation isn't a problem either, as the air conditioning system is so powerful that its effect is comparable to melting 13,000 tons of ice in a day. Right. And what about cleaning those windows? There's a 36-worker crew to take care of all 24,348 windows. Want to guess how much time it takes? Not a week, not a fortnight, not even a month. It takes around 3 months. And this task is performed 4 times a year. 3 by 4 gives us 12, so yeah, it's pretty much a non-stop process. Elizabeth Tower is one of the greatest and most iconic constructions of all time. Don't tell me it's the first time you've heard about it. It's just another name for Big Ben. One of the main secrets of this tower is its foundation, which is crucial to its stability. The tower's base is square, and it measures 40 feet on each side. For such a tremendous construction, a stable foundation is crucial, so Big Ben's construction foundation is 12 feet thick. Still, it's not the foundation it's famous for, but the clock. How do we care for something this high up? For the past 150 years, reaching the top of the clock tower has meant tackling a spiral staircase with precisely 334 steps. There is a spiral staircase with 290 stone steps up to the clock room, followed by 44 to reach the belfry, which gives us those 334 steps I mentioned before, and an additional 59 to the top of the spire. They're currently adding elevator shafts, but don't get too excited. They're mainly for maintenance and security and won't be for regular use. So once you reach the top, there's a door that opens to a narrow walkway behind each of the 4 clock faces. It's a tight fit, just spacious enough for an average person. If you venture a bit further on the stairs, you'll find another door leading to the clock room, which holds the impressive clock mechanism. Now, the clock mechanism is an engineering wonder all on its own, featuring a clever system of weights, gears, and a pendulum that keeps time. The pendulum, measuring 14 feet, plays a vital role in ensuring the clock's precision. As they say, England swings like the pendulum do.
Ever since Plato wrote about the allegory of Atlantis, humanity has been fascinated with the possibility of the discovery of a thriving underwater civilization. Fancy joining me on a trip to a few historic underwater sites? Let's see what we can find out about ancient civilizations. The first one on our list is what is being called the underwater Stonehenge.
Scientists have recently discovered a mysterious pile of cairns that stretch for miles under the shimmering waters of Lake Constance at the borders of Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. Archaeologists began to explore the site back in 2015, and they haven't been able to understand yet what it was actually used for. What they do know is that there is a 12-mile line of 170 human-made stone cairns under Lake Constance. Scientists say this was most likely the result of a combined work of several villages. The cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose. The formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. Now, what were we humans doing back then? We were living in the prime years of the so-called Stone Age. We were beginning to make artifacts from stone and use them to hunt and eat. Can you imagine what a knife and fork might have looked like back in those days? It's no coincidence that scientists call this site the underwater Stonehenge, though. Both sites are believed to have been built around the same period of time. You see, Stonehenge dates back to around 3100 BCE. Both sites carry the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circle. Not to mention the fact that scientists also haven't figured out why on earth our early ancestors would feel the need to build a monument such as Stonehenge. Well, the mystery of Lake Constance hasn't been solved yet. Who were the Neolithic people from this area? And for what purpose did they go through such an amount of work and effort to build this huge stone site? Next, we're taking you on a tour of the Ryukyu Islands just off the coast of Japan. You're diving deep down to an archaeological site. But I should warn you, the waters of the Pacific Ocean are far from smooth. It doesn't take long before you see a huge structure, thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins located across the globe in Peru. As you approach the site, you slowly figure out its forms. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or a castle. Could this be a sign of human activity? What you've just seen is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 soccer fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expanse of terraces. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni might be 10,000 years old. But whether it's a human-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived to the bottom of the ocean to explore the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. On the monument's surface, there is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There's also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And, according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age is around 10,000 years. However, not all scientists support this theory. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe it's not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation in Northern Ireland, known as the Giant's Causeway. The basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they're actually the result of volcanic activity in the region. Now, you're flying to the coast of Greece, 4 hours away from Athens. More specifically, you're in the Peloponnese Peninsula. You dust off an old snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on a seabed. 13 feet below the surface, outlines of familiar objects start to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges in front of your eyes. Are you wondering how water could have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. This is Pavlo Petri, an ancient city you've probably heard about for the first time. It was discovered by Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer, when he was on vacation in Greece. He had heard rumors about Pavlo Petri's existence and indeed found several artifacts on the seafloor. He went back to the area a year later with the team. They found a site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A kernstone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras indicate that this settlement dates back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have existed for over 2,400 years. Today, Pavlo Petri is considered the oldest submerged town ever discovered, and what's impressive is that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has been turned into an archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists only below the surface, but in 1692 it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time and an important trade city that attracted people from all over the region. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they had probably expected. The city woke up shaking. People were thrown out of their beds by the power of a massive earthquake, ranking 7.5 on a Richter scale. One survivor said he had seen Earth opening up and swallowing the whole town. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built on sand. The ground swallowed buildings, roads, you name it. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared under the water. Amazingly, most of its 17th century remains are still in good condition under 40 feet of water. Archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can also see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Of course, I saved the best for last: India. Just off its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambe is located in the Gulf with a similar name. It remained undiscovered until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology made a routine water assessment. With the help of sonar technology, which sends a wave sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains date to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambe might be the oldest civilization in the world.
Saudi Arabia is digging a pit about 1,300 feet wide for a project called the Cube. It's a giant box meant to hold a full indoor city, right in the middle of another city. It's designed to hold more people than some small towns and surround them with ever-changing digital worlds. What's hiding behind this futuristic design? Let's find out. Sure, a sci-fi Minecraft block in the middle of a historic city would definitely be a landmark, but for these architects, that is just a side quest. They actually want to create a full-scale metropolis inside a single structure. This cube, known as the Macabre, will be the center of a brand new downtown district in Riyadh. The scale alone makes it one of the most ambitious construction projects on Earth. The plan calls for a perfect cube that stands over 1,300 feet tall and is just as wide. To put that in perspective, you could fit around 20 Empire State Buildings inside this thing. Everything here is stacked like layers in a massive high-rise, so instead of crossing streets, you'd ride high-speed elevators between levels. Inside that box, the plan is to build a colossal hall in the center. Concept art shows the roof as a massive curved screen that can project almost anything, a blue ocean above you or a sky from another planet. If it works, walking in won't feel like entering a normal building. It might feel like stepping into a different dimension. In the middle of that big space, there's a plan for a spiral tower. It's supposed to be even taller than the Eiffel Tower and have hotels, restaurants, and movie theaters inside. If you manage to book a room there, don't expect to see regular streets out your window. Instead, you'll get a view right into a massive hall, showing whatever cool digital scene is playing at that time. Surrounding this core, the rest of the cube is organized into layers that function like neighborhoods. It's a mix of homes, workplaces, and visitor areas with museums, indoor parks, and huge shopping districts. It's also supposed to have its own internal transit system to move you around, so you never have to step outside. In theory, this single building could house around 400,000 people at the same time. Saudi Arabia isn't spending this kind of money just to collect cool drone shots. The country wants less of its future tied to oil, and more of it tied to visitors, tech companies, and big international events. New Murabba, the district around the cube, is supposed to turn Riyadh into a once-in-a-lifetime sightseeing destination. On paper, the cube works like a city-sized resort mashed together with a business district. If you live there, you sleep in the tower, work in the layers around it, and go out to parks, malls, and digital-themed worlds without ever stepping outside. For tourists, it's a giant, all-inclusive future city experience in a box. The timing is no accident. Riyadh is hosting the World Expo in 2030 and the World Cup in 2034. Millions of people will fly in with cameras in hand. If the cube is finished by then, it will instantly be on every influencer reel and every top 10 things you won't believe exist on Earth video. That's the kind of free marketing you can't buy later. This entire dream world comes with a price. The wider New Murabba project, with the cube as its centerpiece, carries an estimated cost of around $50 billion. That's the annual economy of a small country poured into one district. Early satellite images showed an empty patch of desert on the edge of the city. Later images from 2024 show a huge square crater exactly where the cube is supposed to stand. Crews have already ripped out around 353 million cubic feet of earth, enough to fill thousands of Olympic pools. Zoom in and you'll see rows of excavators chewing through the ground like a metal army. That means we're way past the "is this fake" phase. Construction is already underway. The real question now is much tougher. Can you actually turn this thing into a working vertical city in one of the hottest capitals on the planet on time without creating the world's most expensive cautionary tale? First, there's the desert problem. Riyadh sits in the middle of a desert where temperatures can be extreme. In summer, afternoon temperatures can sometimes go past 113 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there. Now, a giant sealed box sounds like a perfect way to trap heat, which is great if you want to cook vegetables, but not so great if you want a comfortable city. The architects get it, so they designed the shape to help with temperature control. Instead of a flat box, the cube is wrapped in overlapping triangular panels based on traditional Najdi patterns. These triangles break up the harsh desert sun and add more shaded surface. They also leave small gaps where air can move through. The basic idea is simple: block some sunlight to keep the inside cooler. Even with that clever shell, cooling a place like this is still a huge job. You're basically trying to air condition a small city that someone stacked upright. Every single degree outside, every sandstorm, every long summer day pushes the system harder and sends the energy bill even higher. Then there's the fake sky problem. In the concept art, the center hall looks like something out of a sci-fi game. The ceiling and parts of the walls turn into one giant curved screen, so you don't just walk into a decorated lobby. You walk into an ocean scene, or a fantasy city, or a Mars landscape that surrounds you on all sides. That kind of trick already exists in a smaller form. The Sphere in Las Vegas, for example, covers its interior with huge LED screens and throws people into moving digital worlds. The Cube wants to push that even further. Its dome would need a display that's many times larger and can give high-end results without overheating. All of this has to fit inside a very unusual building. A normal skyscraper is just a tall tower, and engineers know how to handle that. The Cube is more like a giant hollow block with a big empty space in the middle and whole neighborhoods stacked around it. It still has to stand up and hold the outer walls, plus the central tower and dome, while the inside somehow doesn't turn into a cramped maze. Then there's the people problem. On a busy day, you've got crowds moving around. In an emergency, you'll need to get them out fast. That's hard enough in a normal mall, let alone in a stacked mini city. While the Cube looks like something from another planet, the main idea isn't. There are other examples of architects trying to squeeze everything they can into a single building. In Chengdu, China, the New Century Global Center already seems like a dream come true for introverts. It's huge enough to feel like a mini city under one roof. You can wake up in a hotel, stroll down indoor streets, and relax on a sandy beach under an artificial sun, all without seeing the real sky outside. Just outside Berlin, there's a huge old airship hangar that's now the Tropical Islands Resort. It's big enough to fit the Statue of Liberty standing up inside. While the countryside can be covered in snow, people inside are swimming in warm water, walking past palm trees, and hanging out under a fake summer sky. Saudi Arabia isn't new to giant futuristic projects. Neom, for example, includes plans for The Line, a straight, mirrored city stretching for miles across the desert, even after recent scalebacks. The same push is behind plans for huge stadiums and even a year-round ski resort in the mountains of the desert country. Which is not a bad thing, because even if these mega projects fall short, they push the limits of what cities can be. Thousands of years ago, people built pyramids that still confuse us. Today, technology finally lets us attempt something just as strange, only this time, it's a glowing cube in the desert. The Cube is an experiment in how far we can bend engineering and imagination at the same time. Whatever the outcome, it's guaranteed to give us some exciting photos.
Well, this eerie Lake Huron discovery may be that it possibly contains the remnants of an entire civilization. Whoa, wait, sounds like Atlantis, right? Well, not exactly. But if there really had been an ancient underwater civilization here, it must have been a pretty advanced one. Around 10,000 years ago, two sharp glassy flakes broke off a stone tool and landed on the ground unnoticed. They stayed buried there for thousands of years until 2013. Then scientists pulled up a small chunk of mud, about the size of a milk carton, from the bottom of Lake Huron, 100 feet underwater. Inside the mud, they found those same two flakes made of obsidian, a shiny black volcanic glass that forms when lava cools quickly. After careful testing, they realized these flakes came from Central Oregon, which is quite a distance, about 2,500 miles away. They found this prehistoric Great Lakes site on the Alpena Amberley Ridge, an underwater landform that once connected what's now Michigan and Ontario. Back then, it was dry land. Early humans used it to build traps for animals like caribou as the Ice Age faded and the Great Lakes began to form. Now, obsidian was the high-tech material of ancient times. It's super sharp and perfect for making tools. If you study the flakes carefully, it's obvious that humans made them. You can see where they struck them and the feathered edges that come from being carefully chipped. That means people were not only crafting tools here, but they also had access to obsidian that came from incredibly far away. It was likely possible through a huge trade network that spanned across the continent. For over 100 years, people have guessed that ancient societies might have existed beneath the Great Lakes, but no one had proof. That's why work on this submerged archaeological site is so important. A team of researchers has been trying to learn more about the 10,000-year-old ruins and the civilization that left them behind for over a decade now. Lake Huron's icy water acted like a time capsule that helped preserve things for thousands of years. So far, researchers have found not only unique stone tools, but also ancient trees with roots still intact and underwater peat bogs that preserved seeds and leaves. It was like an Ice Age version of Pompeii, a scene frozen in time. These discoveries are also helping scientists create new technologies and ways to do underwater archaeology. They've engaged sonars, underwater robots, and divers so far. Now, it's pretty cool that the tools they found on the Alpina Amberley Ridge were way smaller than other tools from the same era found nearby. That might mean a different group of people lived here, and they had their own unique way of life. Even the peat bogs they found, which are about 9,500 years old, hold secrets. They're full of pine needles, seeds, and leaves that could reveal what the environment was like back then. Usually stuff like this breaks down quickly on land, but the cold freshwater preserved it. The Michigan team is working with scientists in Cambridge, England, to extract DNA from the remains. If it works, it could finally confirm what animals lived there, and maybe even more. There are still years of discovery on this prehistoric Great Lakes site ahead. Another famous submerged archaeological site is the lost city of Pavlo Petri. Archaeologists think it is the oldest sunken city in the world they've found and made official so far. Pavlo Petri is around 5,000 years old. That means it existed even before the legendary Greek heroes in Homer's stories. Scientists first spotted it way back in 1904, and then mostly forgot about it until 1967, when Nicholas Fleming rediscovered it. He described it as a Bronze Age city now lying under about 10 to 13 feet of water. A year later, he returned with a team of scientists to study the ruins. Over 6 weeks, using just hand tapes and a basic grid, they managed to map out the city. They found that it covered almost 1,000 feet by 500 feet and had at least 15 buildings, courtyards, 5 streets, 2 tombs, and around 37 small stone graves. They also found signs that the ruins continued onto the nearby island of Pavlo Petri itself. They dug up some amazing pottery, obsidian, and chert blades, and even a tiny bronze figurine that may date all the way back to 2800 BCE. Most of the buildings, though, came from the period between 1650 and 1180 BCE. Then scientists left the site alone again until 2009, when a super team of researchers launched a new 5-year project to really dive deep into the history of Pavlo Petri. This time, they had digital mapping tools and better diving equipment, so they could explore and even excavate underwater. They found another 97,000 square feet of buildings, including a large hall and hidden streets. Plus, they dug up even more pottery that showed people had been living in the city from about 3000 BCE to 1100 BCE, and that the city once had a population of 500 to 2,000 people. No one knows for sure how the city ended up underwater, but many scientists think it was because of an earthquake, maybe around 1000 BCE, or even as late as 375 CE. Because it's the oldest underwater city ever found, some people even believe Pavlo Petri might have inspired the legend of Atlantis. Another contestant for the Atlantis title lies near Japan. Back in 1986, a local diver was exploring the waters near the Ryukyu Islands when he found a giant structure made of perfectly shaped steps and sharp edges, It was 82 feet underwater. Today, the Yonaguni Monument is one of the most mysterious underwater sites on the planet. The structure is nearly half a football field in size. It looks like a massive stone pyramid with layers of platforms and steps stacked one on top of another. No one really knows where it came from or who built it. Some experts think the monument might be more than 10,000 years old, which would make it older than the Egyptian pyramids. One theory is that it could be the last remains of a lost civilization called Mu, a mythical Pacific society kind of like Atlantis. Others believe an ancient culture that lived in Japan as early as 12,000 BCE might have built it. But many scientists and geologists are skeptical about this possible underwater ancient civilization, even though Yonaguni has narrow passageways, arched openings, and right angles that almost look like city blocks. They say that the site looks a lot like natural rock formations, like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, for example. The whole monument is still connected to a bigger chunk of bedrock, which means it wasn't built piece by piece. And the way the layers of rock are stacked probably has more to do with earthquakes and tectonic movement. It's located in the very active Pacific Ring of Fire. One marine geologist kept going back down there, and every time he found something new. He says he spotted tool marks in the rock, symbols carved into stone faces, and even rock formations shaped like animals. He believes these carvings point to a culture that came from mainland Asia. He said he had identified 10 different structures off Yonaguni, including a ruined castle, a triumphal arch, 5 temples, and even a huge museum. These buildings seem to be connected by roads and channels, and some parts are surrounded by what could be giant stone walls. The explorer believes the city is at least 5,000 years old, based on stalactites found in underwater caves nearby, which would have only formed after the caves flooded. His supporters say they have never seen an earthquake create shapes like this, above or below water. But skeptics blame it all on erosion and insist that whirling underwater currents and sea creatures left holes in the rock. Now, if you want to form your own opinion about it, the spot is open for visitors, and it's definitely a super fun diving experience. Question for you. Do you think Atlantis could be real? It remains as one of history's greatest mysteries. The legend began with Plato, all the way back in ancient Greece. The tale of a civilization that formed and prospered before our own. Atlantis was supposedly a highly technological society, much like the Mayans. But, as the legend says, due to the people's greed, they were punished by a flood that destroyed and submerged their cities. Different theories try to guess Atlantis' location. Some say it was in the Mediterranean Sea. Some say it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle. But, as science has shown us, Atlantis may be only an allegory for humankind. Today, you'll discover several amazing underwater cities that you have never heard of. They existed indeed and are not just a myth. We're taking you on an excursion to the underwater city of Baia, which is on the coast of Italy. Known as the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, Baia was a resort city. The Roman elite traveled there for recreation. Imagine an open-air spa. That was Baia. You can visit the submerged town by scuba diving and get close to that perfectly preserved, magnificent Roman sculpture, a true underwater wonder. You can spot the crumbled temples and buildings through glass-bottom boats. This is a moss-covered museum in Claudio's Nymphaeum. To your left, you can see a collection of classical Greek statues. Swimming down the Via Herculeana, you'll arrive at Villa Aprotio. Villas are Italian-style houses, and here you can admire their original marble floors. Notice the black and white patterns and the astounding shapes they make. Next, you'll arrive at Portus Julius. Can you see the collapsing wall structures at the bottom of the seafloor? You'll see well-preserved columns and limestone floors. Behold the ruins of the thermal baths of Lacus. The remaining multicolored mosaics are something great to see. You'll see their orange, blue, and green tiles if you get close enough. At Pisoni's Villa Pila, you'll see 25 preserved Roman pillars. Notice the arches, the frescoes nearby, and the magnitude of this well-kept treasure. The city was located over natural volcanic vents, so there were hot springs to be used at will. People went there looking to have an excellent time. And when I say people, I mean some of the great Roman emperors we learn about in school: Nero, Cicero, Caesar. But around the 8th century, the city was sacked and the luxurious town was abandoned. Slowly, the water level rose and the city started to drown. You are on a summer vacation off the coast of Greece, 4 hours outside of Athens, in the Peloponnese Peninsula on Pavlo Petri. You dust off your snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on the seabed. 13 feet below the surface, the outline of familiar objects starts to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges before your eyes. You wonder, how could water have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer on vacation in Greece, was the person that discovered Pavlo Petri. He was documenting the seafloor artifacts. The team found the site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A quern stone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras, which were found then, indicate that this settlement dated back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have lasted for over 2,400 years. Pavlo Petri is considered today the oldest submerged town yet found, and it's impressive that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone-built buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. Let's continue our exploration and find secrets in other underwater cities. You are diving off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands. Pacific waters are far from smooth. There's a strong current pulling you into the deep sea. Suddenly, you see a huge structure thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins across the globe in Peru. As you approach it, you slowly figure out its form. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or castle. Could this also be a sign of human activity? What you just saw is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a man-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The triangle pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There is also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of the same. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe that it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland, known as Giant's Causeway. A series of interlocking basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region. Well, stay tuned for more underwater discoveries. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has turned into an underwater archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists today only below the surface. But in 1692, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time, and an important trade city that attracted people from all over. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they probably expected. The bars and restaurants beaming with life woke up shaking. People were taken out of bed with the power of a massive earthquake, estimated today at 7.5 on the Richter scale. One survivor says he saw the earth opening up and swallowing the town whole. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built over sand. The ground sucked buildings, roads, and everyone above. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story-high buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared underwater, and amazingly, most of its 17th century remains lie in good condition under 40 feet of water. In the ruins, archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Now, do you fancy a trip to India? Just outside its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambe is located on the Gulf of a similar name. It remained hidden until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology did a routine water assessment. With sonar technology, which sends a wave of sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains found dated to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning that this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambe would be the oldest civilization in the world.
Before we get into the reason why and how there are pyramids all around the world, let's talk about some of the examples. I'll start with the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico. These folks really knew how to build a city. Their well-planned urban center spanned over 7 square miles and boasted several pyramids. But the Pyramid of the Sun is the most impressive. This giant pyramid was built way back in 100 CE and is one of the biggest structures of its kind in the whole Western Hemisphere. It's so big that it's 216 feet high above the ground. If you ever find yourself in this ancient city, you won't be able to miss the Pyramid of the Sun. It's right there on the east side of the Avenue of the Dead, the city's main north-south street. To build this incredible pyramid, around 1 million cubic yards of material were used, including a special kind of red volcanic rock called hued tizontle. Impressive, huh? We don't know too much about the people who built the Pyramid of the Sun or its purpose. But archaeologists believe there was once a temple on top of it. When explorers went below the pyramid in the 1970s, they found a bunch of cool tunnels and chambers. In 2011, they even found a secret stash of clay pots, obsidian pieces, animal bones, human figurines, and a mask. Who knows what other secrets the pyramid is hiding? If you decide to see this one, you must climb the pyramid using the 248 uneven steps on the west side. Watch your step. Sudan got some pyramids too. Nubian pyramids aren't as big as the ones in Egypt, but they still got around 200 of them. These ancient pyramids have been home to the tombs of the pharaohs of the Meroitic Kingdom for almost 1,000 years, who ruled Egypt from Nubia to the Mediterranean Sea. The pyramids at Meroe were constructed using granite and reddish sandstone. Oh, and did you know that Sudan has more ancient pyramids than Egypt? The Kushite pyramids depict the indigenous architecture and burial traditions of Nubia's Napata and Meroe kingdoms, which ancient Egypt influenced. Meroe, the burial site of over 40 queens and kings, is the most extensive Nubian pyramid site. The tomb walls depict mummified royals bedecked in jewelry, their wooden caskets containing bows, quivers of arrows, and other artifacts pointing to the Meroitic relationship and trade with Egyptian and Greek civilizations. So if you're looking for some ancient tombs to explore, you may consider skipping the crowds in Egypt and heading on down to Sudan. Let's fly to Iraq to see some more pyramids. Ziggurats have fancy receding layers and tiered temples. Instead of a smooth exterior, it has tiers like a cake. Perfect for all the important work and rituals that went on inside. You can find these towering structures scattered throughout Iraq and Iran, and they're a real testament to the power and skills of the people who built them. One of the biggest and most impressive ziggurats is the Ziggurat at Ur. It's basically a giant rectangular pyramid that stands a whopping 70 to 100 feet tall, with 3 levels of terraces and a temple on top. Can you imagine how many baked bricks it took to build that thing? Try 720,000 for just the lower portion. This particular ziggurat was built for Sumerian king Ur-Nammu. Similar to other ones, this pyramid has been around for thousands of years, so it got a little rough around the edges. Thankfully, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II and some archaeologists came to the rescue in the 6th and 20th centuries respectively, and now you can find this near Talil Air Base. The ziggurat at Ur was built in 2100 BCE by King Ur-Nammu for the moon deity Nana. It was the tallest building in the city, and you could see it from miles around. It was like the medieval cathedral spire of its day. People would come here to bring their agricultural surplus and get their food allotments and seek spiritual nourishment. Sadly, the Nana temple at the top of the ziggurat didn't survive, but we do have some blue glazed bricks that may have been part of its decoration. The lower parts of the ziggurat are pretty amazing though. The architects even included holes in the temple's baked exterior to let the water evaporate from its core. Since we explored some of the pyramids on our planet, let's take a broader perspective. They can be found in many parts of the world. Egypt has over 100 pyramids, double that number in Sudan, and dozens of others are scattered in the Middle East and China. The Americas have the most pyramids in total, with more pyramids than the rest of the world combined. These pyramids are located in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Time to know more about the evolution of pyramids through history. The oldest pyramid is in Egypt. This pyramid was a step pyramid, which was created by placing one layer of stone on top of another. The pharaoh Sneferu is credited with creating the pyramid shape we recognize today. During his 45-year reign, he built 3 pyramids. His first 2 attempts failed, but he finally got it right with the Red Pyramid, which is considered the first true pyramid. It was Sneferu's son, Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was the tallest human-made structure on Earth for almost 4,000 years. Latin American pyramids are similar to early Egyptian step pyramids, but they were built independently, with no knowledge of each other. The pyramids in Sudan were built around 700 BCE and are tall but much narrower than those in Egypt. How in the world did all these civilizations build these things without even texting each other? After all, the Aztecs, Mayans, and ancient Egyptians were about as different as possible. But despite their cultural differences, they all seem to agree on one thing. Pyramids were pretty cool. Step pyramids are all around the world because they were the most feasible and stable way to build large and tall structures without access to lighter building materials like wood and metal. The triangular form with a square base is the best way to build a sturdy structure, and having a cube structure would require more material for less height. Now, when it comes to pyramid design, the Egyptian pyramids were like giant triangles with a square base, smooth sides, and a pointy top. On the other hand, the Aztecs and Mayans went for a tiered cake look, with steps leading up to a flat platform on top. So, while all these pyramids share the same basic shape, they have their own unique flair. Each group built its pyramids using different materials, techniques, and slope angles. So while they may have been inspired by each other's work occasionally, they were just doing their own thing. Egyptian pyramids had smooth, angled sides that were designed to help the pharaoh's soul ascend to heaven. The Pyramid of the Sun was built over a series of caves that served as a passageway for the deities. The Maya built the temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza to honor the deity Kukulkan, usually represented by a serpent. Nicknamed El Castillo, it has 91 steps on each side, plus a platform. That's 365 steps, one for each day of the Mayan calendar. Tell me, Brightsiders, how were pyramids built? To begin with, humans made them, not a foreign race from space that landed on Earth. You see, one thing that all pyramids have in common is that they were built without advanced tools or even the wheel. It took a lot of people to build them, including skilled laborers and architects. For example, it's estimated that 20,000 people built the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it's believed that most of them were skilled laborers. Building pyramids was a massive undertaking that required years of planning and effort. The Great Pyramid at Cholula, Mexico, took 600 years to complete.
The desert welcomes you with challenging conditions of abandoned environments and extreme temperatures. Hey, some of us would prefer dessert, chocolate, over sand and rocks. Oh well. Just like cactuses and camels, buildings have had to adapt to these conditions. Here are some examples of astonishing structures in deserts. These structures are called earthships. They're located in a New Mexico desert town. A large community of like-minded people lives in them. What's even more interesting is that the location of these buildings is registered as dumpsters. Maybe it's because all these structures are made out of old tires, bottles, and cans. Earthships operate using green building principles. About 40% of a typical earthship is built with natural or recycled materials. Imagine the walls made up of hundreds of used tires packed with dirt. Then there are layers of floor-to-ceiling passive solar windows. They gather the sunlight during winter and reflect it in the summer to keep the structures at a reasonable room temperature. You can see plants in corridors and glass bottles or aluminum cans stuffed inside walls. Certainly a distinct house in many ways. Mike Reynolds is an architect who noticed the alarming waste and consumption levels in the 1970s. He designed a fully sustainable home out of cans back then. Almost 40 years later, he becomes the one who brings together all the other earthshippers. Reynolds drove a Mercedes, but it ran off of the vegetable oil he picked up at fast food restaurants in town. A standard 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom earthship costs about $250,000 in this town. Yet there are earthships like Dobson House that can cost as much as $1.5 million. If you do it yourself, with family and friends, you can eliminate the cost of labor, and it becomes relatively less expensive. Let's assume you're really going to build one. Where can it be? Well, anywhere. Earthships currently fit in the cold, dry air of Canada, as well as the hot and humid climate of Haiti. This is the Mirage Mirror House. It's an installation set in the Southern California desert. Mirage opened in 2017 as part of a contemporary art exhibition. It's composed of mirrors. This minimalistic structure blends with the environment around it. The doors, windows, and openings have been removed to create an amazing experience. What you have in the landscape is reflected back to you. How's it made? With mirrored surfaces. At night, the distant lights refract from the mirrors. In the daytime, the sky is transformed into banks of clouds. There's no fixed scenery in this house. How about seeing a futuristic structure in the deep desert? Architects designed a concept home that pairs perfectly with Elon Musk's Cybertruck. The house has a post-apocalyptic theme. I mean, when I say post-apocalyptic, it's because I can't say it. Anyway, the house is designed to survive in a disaster scenario. The cyber house has steel gates, the windows are armored, and the exterior walls are made out of super strong material. Modern house is controlled by an autonomous geothermal heat pump. To put it in less sci-fi terms, you can keep the internal temperature steady. This sleek house has an entrance that can fit the Cybertruck. After all, it's inspired by it in the first place. Plus, the Cybertruck can be lifted to the second floor to be more secure. This is King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center in Saudi Arabia. Basically, it's a laboratory in a desert. It was designed to demand minimum energy. The architecture has patterns on the walls and ceilings, giving reference to the local tradition of geometric form. The next stop is Swartberg House in South Africa. This one is located near the Swartberg Mountains, but don't get too excited. It's on the edge of the Great Karoo Desert. It's a 4-bedroom apartment. It has a special temperature regulating system. The system works like a shield from the heat in the summer and as a sun trap in the winter. You're looking at the Grand Mosque of Djenné in Mali. This mosque is 52 feet tall. This is impressive because it's made of only sticks and a special mix of mud and other natural elements found in the desert. Petra is an ancient city hidden in the Jordan Desert. The structures are carved directly into red, white, and pink-colored sandstone cliff faces. It's located among the canyons and mountains near the desert. The place was a trade center many years ago. You might already see pictures of the impressive facade of the treasury. This structure still holds many mysteries in it. For starters, scientists can't explain how the Nabateans managed to create such a structure thousands of years ago. Did you know that there's another mysterious place in the middle of the desert that has a similar structure to Petra? Madain Saleh was like a second capital of the Nabatean kingdom. Yet another secret they left for us to decipher. It has over 100 decorated tombs and more than 1,000 non-monumental graves. Plus, inscriptions and cave drawings are also here, again surrounded by sandstone. This wooden shack was a post office once. The structure is in the Tengger Desert of Mongolia. It's surrounded by nothing. Sand is the only thing that accompanies the lonely structure. The building is only 23 square inches. As you can guess, it didn't get too many visitors. It was abandoned for over 35 years. Its fate changed one day when a woman discovered the building. Mrs. Zhang and her friend came up with an idea. They were going to reach businesses and people who wanted to send letters and postcards from the world's loneliest post office without actually visiting the place. It worked. The post office rarely gets visitors in place, but it's busy online. Over 20,000 letters and postcards were sent from the Desert Post Office in December 2021 alone. The place is about 6 miles off the nearest road. A post truck picks the letters up and hits the road for delivery. Eventually, they are shipped all over the world. A second destination in Saudi Arabia is King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture. The building has an interesting design. It took nearly a decade to build this complex structure. It's a 321-foot-tall tower which stands out with its look. Stone Matters Pavilion is a stone structure in Palestine. The structure spans a surface area of 93 square inches. It has been built entirely out of 300 interlocking stones that mutually support each other. The concave roofs, and yes, they look like giant bowls, are designed that way to collect rainwater. The structure is in Iran. Interestingly, in Iran, the evaporation rate is 3 times faster than the world average, so this bowl-like design comes in very handy. It captures the water in a way that the water can form a single mass as a whole before it evaporates. The outer shell of the roof system collects rainwater, but it also works as an additional shading. It makes air move freely, designed like a cooling mechanism for both roofs. Eco Lodge in Egypt is the next stop. The project is built in a place that overlooks the desert and is constructed using locally available materials like sun-fired bricks and palm wood. The building is an example of traditional architecture. There's a water basin that lets in the air to keep the interior cool. A worthy mention is the CID Interpretation Center in Chile. Chile's Atacama Desert is among the top tourist destinations in the country. To help the tourists, architects designed a visitor center as part of the infrastructure for the wind farm. Here, the cold winter months don't freeze people because the large windows make the most of solar heating. What's even more interesting is that the building is designed to go completely dark at night. Imagine you somehow bumped into the building by accident. Black Desert House is a building respecting the stars. At night, this house goes completely dark. It dissolves into the night, so the stars can appear more prominent. Now, any mysterious desert buildings you know that aren't on this list? Let us know in the comments.
Secant cosine tangent sine 3.14159.
Yeah, that was the cheer we heard coming from the trigonometry club back in the day. For the rest of us in math class, terms such as sine, tangent, and pi were just bewildering. Who invented these and why? Was their only purpose to make it harder for students? Well, not quite. Trigonometry was invented by the ancient Egyptians. They needed this knowledge to construct pyramids, and they did a pretty good job too. The Great Pyramid in Giza still stands today, some 4,500 years after it was built. No recalls either. So let's get out of that classroom and on a journey through time to reveal the secrets behind the ancient Egyptians' precision. Here you are, standing on the Great Pyramid's construction site, some 9 miles from Cairo. Well, the city still isn't there, as you're surrounded only by the desert and teams of construction workers. They're transporting large stone blocks weighing 2.5 tons each. They're inside a wooden sled that sits on large rollers. A crew of 8 men rolls these blocks along the ground. You immediately think of the rollers on a supermarket cash register. The principle is exactly the same, but the scale is greater, much greater. Scientists estimate that the Egyptians used 2.3 million such blocks in the Great Pyramid alone. And the block in front of you is one of the lighter ones. The heaviest of them weighed up to 15 tons. But where did all these blocks come from? Most of them originated from quarries around Giza. It's not that impressive, you think, but wait until you hear how ancient engineers transported the granite used in construction over 500 miles to the pyramid. There were no railways or highways back then, but the mighty Nile was always there. Researchers even believe that the Egyptians dug a canal to connect the Nile directly to the pyramid's construction site. All they had to do then was to wait for the flood season to begin, and voila! The rising water levels floated the heavy stone blocks for them. But how did they lift the enormous stones on dry land to stack them up to the top? Did they use oversized cranes? Well, ancient Egyptians worked around this problem, literally speaking. One of the workers is now pointing to the giant ramp going around the pyramid they're building. This is how a mountain road zigzags its way to the top. If the ramp went directly to the top of the pyramid, then workers couldn't pull the stone blocks along it. It would be too steep. Scientists have calculated that 8% could be the maximum incline. So ancient Egyptians just extended the ramp around the pyramid. Again, these are all theories, as the ramp could have been inside the pyramid, as some researchers suggest. The exact building method is still a mystery, guarded by the Sphinx. That's its real name, right? Wrong. As the Great Sphinx is just the statue's alias. You know, the name writers take when they want to hide their true identity, or a singer's stage name. The Sphinx's real name, translated from Egyptian, means Horus in the horizon. That was the name for the Egyptian deity of the sky. The trail of mystery doesn't end there. As a man walks past you with a bucket of paint, he's going to add a touch of color to the Great Sphinx. Researchers found specks of this red color next to its ear. That was some strong paint, as it survived for thousands of years. You are now standing straight in front of the Sphinx. You look up. It's very tall, right? 66 feet to be precise. Now resist the urge to take a selfie. You can do it. Now you notice something else. It looks like the Sphinx is in the center of a giant triangle in the back. That's one side of the Great Pyramid. And no, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. The Sphinx really does sit in the center of the pyramid's lateral face. Here's where math comes in handy. A pyramid has 4 sides, called lateral faces. There's also a 5th face, the base, but that's not visible. It's, wait for it, face down. The Sphinx has one last mystery to reveal: its age. Scientists agree that Pharaoh Khafre built the Sphinx. He ruled after his father, who had built a great pyramid nearby. So both structures were finished around the same time. Let's talk about numbers again. You've heard of Cleopatra, the Egyptian princess described as a woman of great beauty.
Hello?
She saw the pyramids, but she lived closer to the time of the first iPhone than the time of the people who built the pyramids. Fascinating, right? You can see thousands of people around you. They're working hard to build the pharaoh's tomb. But how many of them are there exactly? One Greek philosopher estimated there were as many as 100,000 workers. Seems like an okay number for such an enormous structure, but it can't be true. Science simply can't back up this number. Egyptologists put the total number of workers at 30,000. And yes, Indiana Jones was one of them, at least on the big screen, but he showed up late. Egyptologists know a lot about the pyramids, but not everything. Not because they don't want to, but because they haven't yet dug up enough evidence. They can only guess how the building process went. First, engineers would arrive to choose the right spot and do the necessary measurements. That's why they needed all that complicated math. Then, it's time for sourcing the material, the large stone blocks I mentioned earlier. When boats deliver them to the site of the future pyramid, workers can finally do their thing. They operated in smaller groups, but there were at least 2,000 of them chiseling and carving away at any given time. Sounds like a typical construction site today? Well, that's because it is, just thousands of years ago. It's amazing what ancient Egyptians were able to achieve with just copper and stone tools. The pyramid is now complete in front of you. But is it the same pyramid we see today? Why is this structure shining bright in the desert sun? Isn't it supposed to be a dusty yellow color? Well, no. Human activity and the elements have completely stripped the outer layer of stones over time. Expert craftspeople polished these blocks using nothing but stone and sand. The end result was a smooth and shiny rock. On the day it was completed, the Great Pyramid of Giza was a perfect triangle of light. Its polished sides acted like giant mirrors, reflecting the powerful Egyptian sun. This is the point where you should put your glasses on, and that shiny thing you see at the pyramid's very top is actually gold. The capstone at the top of the pyramid is called a pyramidion. It was covered in sheets of gold. As you can guess, these were the first stones to disappear. Let's make another stop before we get you back to your classroom. We travel to the British Isles, and no, Stonehenge isn't our destination. It is Newgrange in County Meath. Scientists estimate that the ancient peoples of Ireland built this stone monument around the year 3200 BCE. This makes it older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid in Giza. The function of the circular mound in Newgrange is the same as the one of the Great Pyramid and equally mysterious. The estimated amount of loose stone present in the valley is over 220,000 tons. And it's not just randomly thrown on a pile. The order in which the stones are set makes the structure water-resistant. That would explain how Newgrange had survived for so long. Kinda makes you want to splash out the cash for that waterproof phone case, huh? Well, you're back in your school desk, but today's math lecture is the last thing on your mind. You're thinking about how great the Egyptian pyramids are, and if we have something similar today. It turns out modern engineers are just as impressed with the Great Pyramid as you are. There's a glass pyramid sitting in the main courtyard of the famous Louvre Museum in Paris. The panorama of San Francisco wouldn't be complete without the 48-story Transamerica Pyramid. But Las Vegas went the furthest. There we find the Luxor Hotel. It's so big that it's the third largest pyramid on the planet. And guess what's in front of it? Yup, a replica of the Sphinx. It's 110 feet tall, 2 stories higher than the one in Giza. Yeah, everything's bigger in Vegas. Hundreds of thousands of tourists try to push it back up for cool photos. But can anyone really save the Leaning Tower of Pisa from falling over? The tower is one of the most famous examples of medieval architecture and a part of a complex called Pisa's Field of Miracles. In the 12th century, when the construction began, it was pretty unusual for a bell tower to stand away from a cathedral. But that is, of course, not the most unique feature of the tower. No one actually planned for it to be leaning on one side, but things happen, you know. It started tilting southward shortly after the beginning of construction because of the soft ground under its foundations. That soil couldn't handle the weight of the heavy white marble and started to go down. The builders decided to get creative and add each next floor at an angle to fix the tilt, but it didn't help. Once 3 of the 8 floors were finished, The tilt was so obviously getting worse that they had to halt the process to solve the problem. Because of a major conflict between Pisa and the city-state of Genova, the construction stopped for around 100 years. This time was enough for the soil to get in a better condition. A new architect took charge of the process, and in 1372, the tower was ready, tilted at 1.6 degrees. A popular legend says that Galileo Galilei, a famous Italian astronomer and physicist, dropped 2 different weights from the tower to prove that lighter and heavier objects fall at the same speed. If that legend is true, he would have done it when the tower was tilted at about 3 degrees. Almost 3 centuries later, an architect working on the tower wanted to show the world the beautiful carvings on its base, hoping to increase its value. Sadly, it made the construction tilt like never before. Oops. But even despite all this, Pisa's main symbol managed to survive at least 4 massive earthquakes. It turned out that the moldable soil prevented the tower from resonating with earthquake ground motion. In the middle of the 20th century, when the tower was already leaning at 5.5 degrees, Italian officials decided to invite experts to save it from completely falling over. Ideas on how to preserve the ancient monument arrived from all across the world, and they created a special international committee. They came up with an idea to extract soil from beneath the tower's northern foundation to put it back in an upright position. The team ran computer simulations and decided to bring the plan to life before it was too late. Workers wrapped steel bands around the first level of the tower to protect the stone. They put an impressive amount of lead weights on the northern side of the tower and connected it to cables set deep underground. Then they started drilling and removing the soil step by step. This method worked and helped to pull the tower against the direction of the tilt. The team had to repeat the process over several years at 41 different locations around the tower. Talk about perseverance. In May 2008, the tower finished straightening and finally stood still. It lost a total of 19 inches of its tilt. Not bad at all. Engineers believe it will stand strong for at least another 200 years. And with the technology of the future, it should be easy to fix it again and let it stand for another 800 years. Or who knows, maybe robots will figure out how to preserve it forever. So, you have no reason to worry about the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But you might get concerned about the future of some other leaning towers around the world. The bell tower of Syracuse, Germany, held the official title of the world's furthest leaning church tower for years. It was built of granite more than 625 years ago on marshy soil. The foundation was made of oak tree trunks. The water in the ground actually helped to preserve it. When it was drained in the 19th century, the wood deteriorated and the tower started tilting. They had to close it to reinforce the tower, and it has been functioning as a church since it became safe again. In the summer of 2022, another German tower beat the record of the bell tower of Syracuse. A special commission measured the tilt of the Leaning Tower of Gau-Weinheim, and it turned out to be 5.42 degrees. It's a medieval fortified tower, and its bell still rings 3 times a day. The most famous clock tower in the world, London's Big Ben, is also leaning on one side. By the way, Big Ben is actually the name of the bell inside the tower, which was renamed the Elizabeth Tower in 2012. Anyway, the tower is now leaning about 1/4 of a degree to the northwest. It sounds like nothing, but in the long term, it could become unstable. Experts don't know what's causing the tilt. There's a theory that says that the London clay on which Big Ben stands is drying out. The keeper of the great clock mentioned it could be between 4,000 and 10,000 years until the tilt becomes a serious problem. I can wait. The Belfry Tower of Bruges, another famous construction, is a real survivor. Lightning struck it at the end of the 15th century, burning the spire to ashes and ruining the bells. The new spire was also devoured by flames 2.5 centuries later. So what you see today is the result of several rebuildings. The tower now has 47 bells. They used to play an important role in the life of the city. The bells would ring to announce fire alarm, work hours, and major events. If the tilt of 34 inches isn't disturbing you, you can climb the tower to enjoy the views from the top. And if you think only constructions from the Middle Ages can tilt when no one asked them to, meet San Francisco's Millennium Tower. The skyscraper is the tallest residential building in the city. It offers luxurious apartments and tilts more than 2 feet north and west. It has no plans to stop leaning so far and keeps going at a speed of 3 inches a year because it's sinking into the ground. And if no one manages to solve the problem, it could reach a tilt of 40 inches. If it goes any further on the side, the elevators and plumbing might not function anymore. All this is most likely the result of a construction mistake. The proposed solution now is to install 18 steel pipes down to bedrock deep underneath the tower to halt and probably even reverse some of the tilting. Some buildings are made tilted on purpose. The Capitol Gate Tower is one of the architectural gems of Abu Dhabi, UAE. This beauty has an incline of 18 degrees, which helped it win the title of the farthest leading building made by humans. The tower has 35 floors and symbolizes the blending of sea and desert. The main construction is supposed to look like a spiral of sand, and the curved canopy is a splash of water. Because of this unique shape of the tower, each floor and even each room inside has a one-of-a-kind shape and size. The tallest leaning tower, made tilted on purpose, is the Montreal Olympic Stadium Tower in Canada. It's half as tall as the Eiffel Tower and tilts at a whopping 45 degrees. It looks quite unsafe, but actually supports most of the weight of the roof of the main building, thanks to its design. The tower was supposed to be open for the 1976 Olympic Games, but building it took longer than planned. The top 3 floors of the tower host an observatory with panoramic views of up to 50 miles in every direction. A funicular can take you up there to enjoy the scenery, but you gotta be prepared for a 2-minute ride. Hey, don't worry, you can lean on me. It's strange if you think about it. There are old Roman buildings that have lasted for thousands of years, while our newer buildings seem to fall apart. How did the Romans manage to create such strong buildings? A lot of them with complicated designs, too. Recent research has shown that the Romans used a type of concrete that has an extra layer of protection against the elements. It can even fix itself when it gets wet. This discovery not only explains why these buildings have lasted for thousands of years, but it can also help us make cement in a way that's more natural and resistant. A recent study shows that Romans used volcanic ash in their concrete mix to make it stronger, especially when it was near the ocean, where the air is naturally more humid and could naturally cause more damage. These days, we make concrete out of sand, rocks, water, and a special kind of cement called Portland cement. This cement itself is made by cooking limestone, clay, and other substances in very hot ovens that reach over 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. Sure, it creates a well-blended mixture, but it cracks easily, and sometimes it only lasts a few decades. There's one more interesting feature of this amazing Roman concrete. It has small white bits of calcium called lime clasts that stay inside the concrete and do not disappear over time. At first, it may not seem that attractive because it's not as smooth as the concrete we use today. And for many years, specialists used to think that having small pieces of lime in concrete was a bad thing because they thought it made buildings less resistant. But researchers found out that these tiny pieces actually help the concrete fix itself. I wish I could fix myself that easily. They discovered that when the concrete got cracks, it seemed to magically fill them with a substance called calcium carbonate, found in the lime clasts. The Romans made their concrete by mixing sand, volcanic ash, and burned limestone together and adding water. This is called hot mixing. When the water and lime mix together, they have a chemical reaction that makes the mixture get very hot, up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. This also causes those tiny pieces of lime to form. Now, this concrete can get cracks, and when water, rain, or seawater gets in, it makes the calcium in the concrete dissolve. The calcium then sticks to the cracks and makes them close up, kind of like a scab. Of course, researchers had to test this method, and they made concrete as the Romans did. Shortly after, they cracked it here and there. They placed the cracked concrete under water, and after 1 to 3 weeks, the cracks were gone. Safe to say, this didn't happen with concrete made using modern methods. Now, the Romans didn't know the science behind making their concrete strong, but they found a good recipe by trying different things over a long time period. Ancient records show that they used this recipe to build strong structures, especially for ships, and continued to use it once they found it was successful. Now, not all Roman buildings made it to the 21st century in perfect condition. The Colosseum, for instance, one of the most famous Roman constructions in the world, used to be nearly twice as large as it is today. It sustained a lot of damage throughout the ages, reaching the form we've come to know today. Let's not forget, it's a pretty old building to begin with. Its construction started in the year 70 under Roman ruler Vespasian, who later started making motor scooters named after him. You know, Vespa? Nah, I made that up. Anyway, ever since it first opened, the Colosseum was home to a lot of activities and shows, featuring fearless gladiators and a large display of exotic animals, who got to mingle and did lunch together. Unfortunately, it all went downhill in 217, when a fire struck the upper parapets and much of the building's interiors. It took a whole century to finish up the repairs for the damages. Sadly, the initial shape of the Colosseum would be gone forever. A strong earthquake followed, and that didn't help either. This one took place in southern Italy in 443. At this point, a considerable portion of the Colosseum's outer ring was damaged. Soon enough, when locals encountered hardship, they had to rely on selling chunks of limestone from the ancient Colosseum to go by. Another earthquake came in 1349, which gave the Colosseum its most devastating blow. It's when the south side of the building collapsed completely. That's when it started to look more like the building we can see today in the Italian capital. It's not all bad, though. Some pieces of stone that were shaken off the Colosseum were used to rebuild other famous landmarks in Rome. So, if we think about it, the missing part of the Colosseum isn't missing at all. It's just been recycled all around the city. One building that features pieces of old stone Colosseum is called Palazzo Venezia, and it's a local museum. Now, speaking of weird buildings, you've probably seen this one, as it's one of the most photographed spots in the world. You can see online photos of people leaning on it, or ones that make the building look like an ice cream scoop. This famous Italian landmark is called, you tell me. Yep, the Tower of Pisa, and it looks like it's seconds away from collapsing to the ground. Now, should you ever want to visit, you'll need to head over to this Italian city with the same name, Pisa, near the Square of Miracles. Now, weirdly enough, this building is more famous for its awkward incline rather than for its history or purpose. Back in 1178, when the construction of the tower was still not completed, people realized that the building was starting to lean over, and that was before they had reached its third floor. They soon figured out it had nothing to do with the building plans or the materials they used. It was all happening because of the mushy and shifting soil which was beneath the construction. These days, we know that placing a building on top of soil made of clay, fine sand, and shells isn't the best idea. But back then, people didn't know how to figure that out before building something. Now, fast forward some centuries, and it became clear that this 180-foot tower isn't just leaning, it is falling, and at a considerable rate of about 0.08 of an inch per year. Well, that may not sound like a lot, but multiply that by hundreds of years and, well, just look at the pictures and you'll understand. This leaning tower is more than 16 feet off its axis in the present day. So how come it hasn't fallen over altogether? Well, because of physics mostly. Its center of gravity continues to be located within the base of the structure, so it's pretty grounded. It's also been continuously watched over by local authorities to make sure they protect this unique building for as long as possible. The Pantheon is another great example of the way Romans understood architecture. It's also located in Rome and was initially built as a temple. The construction itself was made from concrete with different thicknesses and has an interesting shape too. Back in the day, Romans believed the Earth was like a disc, which was covered by a dome-shaped sky. So they modeled the Pantheon sticking to this idea. Light comes into the temple through a hole in the dome, shining down on the floors and walls, showing the movement of the sun. It's also one of the best preserved ancient Roman buildings. It's no wonder many other buildings have been made to look like it. In the U.S. alone, the U.S. Capitol, the Jefferson Memorial, and the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. are all said to be modeled after this ancient construction. The famous painter Michelangelo was so impressed by this building that he believes some unnatural force must have helped in its construction. The place where it stands is also very special because of the story behind it. Legend has it that the founder of Rome, Romulus, was lifted to the ancient Roman higher spirits on the wings of an eagle from this exact location. Apparently, it was a talon show. Get it? Talons? Eagles? Okay, gotta go. Scientists have recently discovered Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages under a medieval castle in Italy. They followed a newly found 15th century sketch by the creator of the Mona Lisa and found one of the unexplored architectural wonders from the age of the Renaissance. Construction of the Sforza Castle started back in 1358, but it was destroyed about a century later during a local crisis. Then, in 1450, Francesco Sforza, the Duke of Milan, decided to rebuild it on the old ruins. After he passed away, his son Ludovico took over and kept improving the castle. He brought in some of the best artists of the time, including Leonardo da Vinci, to decorate its walls. We can still see Leonardo's frescoes today in the Room of Wooden Boards. While he was working at the castle, da Vinci also recorded some historical underground passages hidden beneath the outer wall. The drawing, dated between 1487 and 1490, was found at the Institut de France in Paris. The sketch is highly precise, and it proves that Leonardo was really interested in fortification design and was great at documenting existing structures. Historical records show that Ludovico ordered the building of an underground passageway that led straight to a basilica, where his wife was buried. Ludovico married Beatrice in 1491, and they had a happy but tragically short marriage, as Beatrice passed away while giving birth in 1497. The Duke locked himself away for weeks, grew a beard, and wore only black clothes while he was mourning his beloved wife. The secret tunnel may have stretched over a half a mile and would let Ludovico visit her grave in private. It could have served as an escape route if the castle was ever under siege. The existence of the tunnels remained one of the mysteries of the Renaissance for years, as no one knew for sure they were there. But now, scientists finally uncovered the secret history. They used a combination of ground-penetrating radar and laser scanning to build up an accurate 3D model of all the structures under the castle. They found the tunnels da Vinci alluded to in his drawings, and it looks like they may have only been a small part of a whole system of historical underground passages. The goal is to create a complete digital twin of the castle that will not only show all the preserved constructions, but also the ancient ones that are no longer visible. They also plan to add augmented reality to the virtual paths to let visitors discover Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages. Now, we don't know if the genius actually took part in constructing the hidden passages that scientists recently discovered, but we do know about some other Leonardo da Vinci inventions. He created the first satellite-like map in 1502, long before photography or satellites were even a concept. A famous figure in Italy, Cesare Borgia, invited Leonardo to a small town called Imola, near Bologna, to create a highly detailed map for him. Back then, maps were not very precise, as no one had figured out how to show exact distances on a smaller scale. Instead, people spent a lot of time decorating them with dragons, roses, fancy castles, mountain ranges, flowers, and other artistic details. These maps look more like beautiful paintings meant to be displayed, rather than practical tools for navigation. But Cesare Borgia wanted something truly functional, and Leonardo managed to create something revolutionary in the field of cartography. If you compare satellite images of Imola today with Leonardo's map, the similarities are striking. He captured every alley, curve of the streets, roadways, and even the exact sizes of the buildings. And he did it all by hand, using just a pencil, ruler, compass, and several of his own clever inventions. To gather all the necessary data, the genius walked through the streets for weeks using a large wheel that spun as he moved, recording the distance with a cable. Using the magnetic compass, he determined precise directions. He also developed a tool called the boussole, which measured angles inside a circle. With this, he could track the exact turns of each street and the size of the intersections. He figured out the distances between houses and major roads. Then, back at home, he used his notes and calculations to draw the map to scale with incredible precision. In his work, Da Vinci also used a technique developed by Florentine humanist Leon Battista Alberti. He created a mapping method where you could place an entire city inside a circle using polar coordinates. At the center of the city, 8 straight lines met, representing the main directions of a compass. Leonardo used this system to divide the town into 8 sections. He didn't overlook even the smallest buildings, which made his map one of the most advanced of its time. The Italian genius had a big dream to build a machine that could let people fly. He studied how birds, bats, and kites moved through the air and designed a special flying machine. He believed that if he could copy their movements, humans might be able to soar like them. Da Vinci's design looked a lot like a bat, with 2 large pointed wings that stretched over 33 feet wide. He planned to build the frame from lightweight pine wood and cover it with raw silk to make it strong but not too heavy. The person flying it would lie on their stomach on a wooden board in the center. To make the wings flap, the pilot had to pedal a crank with their feet, which was connected to a system of rods and pulleys. There was also a hand crank for extra power and even a headpiece to help steer. As the person moved their hands and feet, the wings would flap and twist, just like a bird's. But there was one big problem. Humans aren't strong enough to make the machine lift off the ground. Even though it might have worked once in the air, there was no way for a person to get it flying on their own. Leonardo probably realized this, but his amazing idea still inspired flying machines that came centuries later. Da Vinci was way ahead of his time with many of his inventions, but his idea for a humanoid robot was especially futuristic. He was working under the patronage of the Sforza family, the one that had those ancient tunnels of Italy built. The genius designed a mechanical knight that could move its arms, turn its neck, and even open and close its mouth. Da Vinci had good knowledge of anatomy and the mechanics of body movements that helped him. His unusual creation used an external system of cables. A hand crank set it in motion, and there was also an internal gear-driven mechanism. About 450 years later, Da Vinci's detailed sketches of the robotic knight were rediscovered in the 1950s. Several researchers tried to recreate the robot from those sketches. In 2002, a roboticist who developed systems for NASA and Lockheed Martin took inspiration from the old notes and built a functioning model of Da Vinci's robotic knight. Another design Leonardo created for Duke Sforza was a special kind of bridge that could be taken apart and carried easily. It was made for defense forces who needed to cross rivers or moats while traveling. This bridge would swing across the water and land on the other side. It had wheels and used a rope and pulley system, so it could be set up quickly and packed away just as fast. To keep it steady, it even had a special weight to help balance it. Leonardo wrote in his notes that the bridge was light yet strong, and he designed several bridges like this for the Duke. One of his other designs was a bridge that could be built very quickly, and the defense forces would move across multiple rivers. As scientists continue to study Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages, they reveal new chapters in human history. Who knows what other unexplored architectural structures they will find?
In August 2025, Italy approved the construction of the Strait of Messina Bridge, a massive project expected to cost about $15.5 billion. The goal is to connect mainland Italy to the island of Sicily. The ferry crossing itself takes about 20 minutes, but during busy times, that short trip can turn into hours. So being able to just drive across could make life a whole lot easier for locals. We'll get into the ambitious details later, but let's start with a pretty important question. Why hasn't this bridge been built already? Well, because building it means tackling the Strait of Messina, and that's probably one of the toughest regions to build something on that scale. And there are 5 main reasons for that. First up, earthquakes. This bridge would be built right above a major fault line in one of the most seismically active areas in Europe. The Strait of Messina sits in a restless part of Earth's crust where the African plate is pushing toward the Eurasian plate. And that pressure doesn't move in one clean direction. It squeezes the ground in some places, pulls it apart in others, and creates a complicated mess of forces underground. Those extreme interactions lead to serious seismic activity, the kind that can wipe out entire cities. In 1908, for example, a massive earthquake hit this region and triggered a tsunami, sending waves estimated at around 40 feet high. Together, these events nearly destroyed Messina, Reggio Calabria, and dozens of nearby coastal towns. And tragically, more than 100,000 people lost their lives. The problem is that kind of constant, dangerous ground movement could threaten the bridge's safety. I mean that during construction and even after it's finished. Second, the distance. At the closest point, Sicily is only about 2 miles from the mainland. If we were talking about 2 cities, that's nothing. But for a suspension bridge, it's like trying to stretch a rubber band across a stadium and hoping it never snaps. It requires serious next-level engineering. To put it in perspective, the biggest suspension bridge in the world today is the Çanakkale Bridge in Turkey. The distance between its 2 main towers, the part that hangs completely over the water, is a little over 1.2 miles. For the Italian bridge, that main span would be almost twice as long. Once it's finished, the Strait of Messina Bridge would be the longest single-span bridge in the world. Then, we've got the currents. The Strait of Messina has some of the strongest tidal currents in Europe. The water can move fast, change directions quickly, and even form whirlpools. Most of the time, the main flow goes from south to north, but there's also a smaller current that runs the other way. They usually switch every 6 hours, and that makes any construction in or near the water a real struggle. The fourth big challenge is the wind. The strait acts like a funnel, meaning that strong, messy winds get pushed through it. And with very long suspension bridges, wind isn't just annoying, it can make the whole structure shake in dangerous ways. The strongest wind recorded there in more than 20 years of monitoring was about 67 miles per hour. So yes, this new bridge would have to handle even stronger winds. And finally, the last big challenge is the environment. This stretch of sea is one of 3 of Europe's main highways for migrating birds, like the red-footed falcon or the honey buzzard. And that really matters because their survival depends on it. For many of these birds, the migration trip is already brutal. They have to cross 2 huge natural barriers, the Mediterranean Sea and the Sahara Desert. There's nowhere to rest on the water, and the desert is too hot and too long for many species to survive without stopping. So, Italy becomes one of their last safe places to land, eat, and recover before they take on the hardest parts of the journey. But things like noise and bright lights can disturb them. And because this area has strong legal protections for wildlife, projects often run into legal roadblocks. This new bridge plan is no exception. Environmental groups have already raised concerns, saying the project doesn't clearly show how they will avoid damaging nature. So there are problems with the distance, earthquakes, strong winds, powerful currents, and on top of that, birds might not like this bridge at all. Sounds like a lot to handle, right? But apparently the designers and authorities think this new plan can deal with all of it. This huge bridge is expected to be finished sometime between 2032 and 2033. And if everything goes as planned, it would become the biggest infrastructure project in the Western world. Supporters say it could create about 120,000 jobs each year and give a real boost to southern Italy. From a technical point of view, it's honestly fascinating. It will be massive. In fact, it would be the biggest suspension bridge in the world. Its pillars would be so tall, they'd rise higher than the top floors of the Empire State Building. It's also designed to handle a lot of traffic. It will have 3 car lanes in each direction, plus a double railway line in the middle. In theory, it could carry around 6,000 cars an hour and about 200 trains a day. Even though the project has officially got the green light, many Sicilians are still doubtful. And honestly, you can't blame them. This bridge has a reputation for being a never-ending project that keeps coming back, then stalling again. You know, people have been dreaming up the Messina Bridge for a long, long time. In fact, plans go all the way back to the Roman era. At that time, they wanted to link the two sides with a chain of connected boats. But since that kind of bridge wouldn't be permanent, they gave up on it. We can say that the modern saga really took off in the 1960s. They hoped that connecting Sicily more directly to the mainland would bring in the kind of international investment that other parts of Italy had been getting for years. So they started throwing around all kinds of ideas. Some plans were pretty wild, like underwater tubes, floating supports, even a bridge with a middle section that could spin around. But none of those options were truly realistic. And that's the thing. Since 1969, the Strait of Messina Bridge project has been approved, then cancelled over and over again. Now you might be wondering, okay, but why is this still so hard? Well, the distance is a huge deal. Like you already know, it would be the first time anyone's built a suspended bridge this massive. But from an engineering standpoint, it's doable. Then you've got the natural obstacles we talked about earlier. Earthquakes, strong currents, and all that. But even those shouldn't be that impossible anymore. In Roman times, yeah, it would have been a disaster. A bridge made with barrels and boats wouldn't stand a chance. But today, we have the technology. Countries like Japan and Turkey have already built major bridges in highly active earthquake zones. And we don't even have to look that far. In the US, the Golden Gate Bridge sits close to the San Andreas Fault, which puts it at risk of a major quake. But engineers have strengthened it with systems designed to withstand the strongest earthquakes we can realistically expect. So, what really stands in the way now is more than the human obstacles, things like the massive price tag, tricky financing, and worries about the project being poorly managed. Okay, but since the project was recently approved, they can start finally building, right? Approval is a huge step, sure, but it doesn't mean they can immediately start pouring concrete in the strait. The project is on pause again. Italy's Court of Auditors have asked for more time to go through all the paperwork for something this huge. Still, the authorities say they can fix those issues and answer the court's questions. So the idea is still alive, it's just moving very slowly. And maybe one day, the Strait of Messina Bridge will finally move from paper to real life. Did you know that India is building a megastructure visible from space? It's happening in Andhra Pradesh, a region home to 50 million people and some of the worst climates on Earth. When it rains here, it pours enough to cause massive floods. When it dries, it turns fertile ground into a wasteland. This ambitious construction is supposed to solve the issue once and for all. However, if this multi-billion-dollar project backfires, the consequences could be devastating. Let's see why. The second longest river in India is called the Godavari. During the monsoon season, this river acts like a fire hose that nobody can turn off. We aren't talking about a drizzly afternoon. From June to September, the sky practically unzips. The water level rises and the river transforms from a calm stream into a chaotic force that swallows entire villages in days. But that's not all. A huge amount of that fresh water goes completely to waste. It rushes past the villages and dumps straight into the Bay of Bengal. Once it hits the salty ocean, it's useless for drinking or farming. We're talking about billions of gallons of much-needed water disappearing into the sea every single year. Now, on the other hand, we have the Krishna River Basin, just a few hundred miles away. There, it's literally the opposite issue. Farmers are staring at dry cracks in the ground. They're praying for rain that never comes. And Krishna does not get strong monsoon support, and most of its water is already used up before it even reaches this region. By the time it arrives, it's more like a tired stream than a healthy river. That's why the authorities looked at the map and came up with a solution. Basically, take the excess water from the angry river and push it over to the dry river. This brings us to the Polavaram. The engineers are building a structure that's a giant machine, not just a wall. It's built to connect these two massive water systems, like running a giant pipe from the side that has too much to the side that has almost nothing. The project combines a massive earth and rock dam with a hydropower plant and a network of canals. However, the most impressive part of this layout is the spillway. It's a giant complex of concrete, channels, and support systems. It looks less like a dam and more like a fortress built for titans. It's a gigantic safety valve for the Earth. It stretches for close to a mile across, wider than 10 football fields placed side by side, and rises several dozen feet above the riverbed. It's fitted with dozens of huge steel gates, each one weighing hundreds of tons, and built to hold back walls of water until the system decides to let them go. The spillway is incredibly powerful. It has a discharge of around 5 million cusecs. In simple terms, it can blast out millions of cubic feet of water every single second. That puts it in the same league as the spillway at China's Three Gorges Dam, one of the most powerful flood control structures on the planet. Engineers designed it to handle what they call a 1,000-year flood. And no, that doesn't mean you need to mark your calendar for the year 3026. It just means there's a 0.1% chance that a flood this massive will hit the valley in any given year. Why are the architects so obsessed with these safety statistics? Because the location leaves no room for error. The Godavari Delta downstream is home to millions of people. If this project backfires, meaning the dam breaches or the gates fail during a storm, it wouldn't just be a leak. It would be a human-made tsunami. The water meant to save the region would instead wipe it off the map. The construction pace of the Polavaram project matches this insane scale. In 2019, the workers on this site set a Guinness World Record. They poured 42,000 cubic yards of concrete in exactly 24 hours. If you loaded all that concrete into standard mixers, you would fill 4,000 trucks. Line them up bumper to bumper, and you'd get a traffic jam stretching for 22 miles. Even with that in mind, the project still has a way to go. It's so big that it starts to bend its own surroundings. It won't just stop or redirect water. It might change the air itself. Once the dam is complete, it will hold a reservoir so large that it'll function like a brand new inland sea. Put that much water under the Indian sun and something obvious will happen. It'll lift into the air. Day after day, the surface will turn into a giant steam engine sending moisture upward. Scientists call this a microclimate, but we call it accidental weather control. By creating a massive body of water, you change the local humidity and temperature. You're essentially installing a giant humidifier in a region that used to be dry. This is the part that makes experts nervous. What if they accidentally create a new climate problem while trying to solve the current one? Once you block a river and create a lake this big, you start messing with the heat and moisture in the air above. The system meant to control water on the ground ends up influencing the weather overhead too. Then there is the issue of moving the water. Picture the state as two giant tanks. One is overflowing and about to burst. The other is dry. The engineers are trying to connect them with a massive pipe to balance the levels before either one becomes a disaster. How are they doing this? To pull this off, they're carving out the earth, digging two massive canals, each stretching more than 100 miles. These aren't simple ditches, they're artificial rivers carved to ignore the natural layout of the land and go where engineers tell them to go. In 2022, monsoon floods slammed into the site mid-build. Water forced its way past temporary barriers and damaged critical leak control work. The crew had to stop, assess the damage, and start restoring the damaged sections. And the risks aren't just about concrete breaking. The real cost of this project is human. To build the City of Water, you have to remove the real cities of people. When the reservoir fills, it will submerge nearly 250 square miles of land. That much water does not make room for anyone. Close to 200,000 people would have to be relocated. Old forests, tribal lands, and villages that stood for generations will disappear beneath the surface. This is the price of the project. So, with all this concrete and chaos, when does the ribbon get cut? Here's the twist. This project has been ongoing since the 1940s, back when the British were still in charge. The foundation stone appeared in 1980. Real work waited until 2004. It's a rare piece of infrastructure that has outlived conflicts and economic crashes, yet it's still under construction. Major parts of the main dam are incomplete. The reservoir cannot be filled to its full height, and key power systems have not been installed. Several resettlement zones also remain unfinished, which means the final stage of the project is still years away. Aside from the ambition and the scale, money is also the reason it takes so long. Early plans estimated about $1.5 billion. Today, the cost has passed $6.5 billion and keeps climbing. But is it worth the price? Depends on who you ask. For the farmers watching their fields dry out, the answer is yes. For the families watching their homes get swallowed by the reservoir, the answer is no. The latest deadline for completion is by the end of this decade, so there are no more excuses. The Polavaram project is a testament to human ambition. It's humans looking at Mother Nature and saying, "I think you put that river in the wrong place. Let me fix that for you." Will it work? And how well? We'll find out soon. Until then, the Godavari will keep flowing and overflowing while the Krishna will keep shrinking, looking like an abandoned movie set. Off the coast of Virginia, the ocean floor was recently rearranged on purpose. Massive ships vacuumed up millions of tons of sand, carved shapes that looked as if a giant ice cream scoop had scraped the seabed. It wasn't a geological disaster. It was the first phase of one of the boldest and largest engineering projects in US history. To understand why engineers are literally reshaping the seafloor, you have to look at the map. This is Hampton Roads, Virginia. This region is shaped by water. Two major cities, Norfolk and Hampton, face each other across a busy harbor. For decades, the main way to travel between them was the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel System, or HRBT, built back in the 1950s. It's basically a bridge that ducks underwater only at the ship channel, so cargo and Navy ships can pass above it. That system is now overwhelmed. At peak demand, close to 100,000 vehicles try to pass through this single crossing in a day, pushing it far beyond what it was designed to handle. The road was designed for a different era, when cars were bigger but the traffic was lighter. Today, it can regularly turn into a parking lot in the middle of the sea. But this problem goes beyond missed dinners and being late for work. It is also a national security crisis. Norfolk is home to the largest naval base on the planet. This is where the United States parks its expensive aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines. The base depends on roads. If a crisis happens, the Navy needs to move fast, and if the road is clogged, they'll get stuck in traffic. That makes the stakes incredibly high. At first, the fix sounds obvious. Too many cars? Build a bigger bridge. But Hampton Roads isn't a quiet river. Those aircraft carriers and cargo ships need a wide, unobstructed path to the ocean. A bridge becomes a low ceiling. You can't raise the bridge without blocking traffic for years, and you can't lower it without trapping the fleet. So, engineers chose the only option left: go underneath and create a unique expansion. The official price tag for this job sits at $3.8 billion. The goal is to create two new underwater tubes right next to the old ones, but the logistics here make it difficult. There's not enough land to start digging. The machine needs a dry launch pad to start the dig and a receiving pit to catch it on the other side. That's why the engineers decided to manufacture the land themselves. They brought in dredging ships that operate like floating vacuum cleaners. These vessels lower a suction head to the seafloor to inhale the seabed before pumping that mud water mix through miles of floating pipes. The output is amazing. The pipes shoot the mix up in high arcs that look like a cool, messy rainbow before it builds up on the surface. This process moved enough earth to expand the artificial islands by 15 acres, creating solid ground where there used to be open water. However, this was not just a simple vacuum job. This harbor has been a naval hub for centuries. The seabed is a graveyard of lost history. Dredging crews had to watch out for unexploded stuff hiding in the mud. We're talking about discarded explosives from centuries ago. Sucking something like that into a high-pressure pipe is a quick way to ruin the schedule. Once that new land was solid enough to stand on, the construction team needed a mechanical beast capable of eating through it. That's why they brought in a huge worm-like machine called Mary. Mary is way more than just a supergiant drill. She is a factory on wheels that stretches longer than a football field and weighs over 9 million pounds, roughly the weight of stacking 9 fully loaded jumbo jets on top of each other. At the front of the machine sits a massive cutter head, 46 feet wide, covered in steel teeth that spin to chew through the soil while the rest of the machine builds the tunnel behind it. Building a machine this large costs $70 million, and she had to be shipped from Germany in pieces just to reach the job site. But the coolest part of this machine isn't the steel, it's the human element inside it. Those cutting teeth don't last forever. Grinding through wet sand and silt wears them down, and eventually someone has to go in and change them. You can't just crack open a hatch down there. You're deep under the harbor with tons of water and mud pressing in from every direction. Instead, crews work inside sealed, pressurized sections of the machine. Many of the tools can be reached from inside the TBM itself, but it's still tight, loud, and unforgiving. Every move has to be planned. Systems have to stay carefully controlled. The work is slow, deliberate, and tightly monitored because mistakes here are expensive and dangerous. Digging with Mary was a dangerous balancing act. The ground under the harbor isn't solid rock. It's soft, wet silt that behaves like toothpaste. This created a constant nightmare for the pilots driving the machine. If Mary pushed forward too fast, she would over-excavate, meaning she would suck in too much dirt. This creates a void underground that travels up to the surface. On land, that makes a pothole. In the ocean, it creates a massive sinkhole that could swallow the water above and flood the tunnel. But if she moved too slowly, the sheer weight of the Atlantic Ocean would crush the tunnel face inward. To stop the ocean from winning, Mary used a pressurized slurry shield to push back against the mud, keeping the tunnel face stable while her cutters chewed forward. As she advanced, robotic arms installed concrete rings behind her, turning a hole in the mud into a rigid, waterproof tube in seconds. Steering her was another headache. Mary had no windshield. The pilots were driving blind through the dark. They had to rely on lasers and computers to navigate a strict curve deep underground. They had to hit a tiny target miles away. If they drifted off course by even a few inches, the tunnel wouldn't connect, and the project would be a failure. Mary launched in 2023, and despite all the challenges, after 29 months, she made her final breakthrough in September 2025. While it feels like the finish line, it's really the end of just one phase. Boring the tunnel creates the hollow space, but crews still have to build the tunnel's nervous system. They are currently installing the roadway, power, and lighting. But the most critical piece of tech is invisible to most drivers. It's the ventilation. The biggest danger in an underwater tunnel isn't a leak, it's fire. If a car catches fire deep underground, the smoke has nowhere to go. To solve this, engineers are installing massive jet fans that look like aircraft engines strapped to the ceiling. In an emergency, these fans spin up to hurricane speeds to suck the smoke out and push fresh air in, keeping the escape routes clear. It takes all this complex tech to make an underwater tube feel like a normal drive rather than a survival mission. But the transformation isn't just happening underwater. Above the surface, crews are rebuilding miles of highway to connect the new tubes to the rest of the world. When the sand settles and the ribbon is finally cut, the landscape of Virginia will look deceptively similar. The water will still be there, the ships will still sail, but underneath the surface, the dynamic of the region will have fundamentally shifted. For the commuter, it means getting out of the traffic jam. For the Pentagon, it means the assurance that the Atlantic fleet is never boxed in. But for the engineers, this project is a testament to something bigger. It's proof that not only we can build structures over obstacles, but we can also successfully transform the Earth to fit our needs. Engineers moved islands, vacuumed the seafloor, and bored through miles of unstable slime to create a path where nature never intended one to be. It's a fight against geology and a massive investment in national security. But in Hampton Roads, where the ocean meets the asphalt, It proves that the map is only permanent until it's time for another redraw.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.